Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the House Appropriations Committee Chairwoman Maggie McIntosh, we want to welcome everyone to today's virtual bill hearing on February 10th, 2021. This afternoon, we have 12 bills that the committee will be hearing, and the first bill will be presented by Committee Chairwoman Maggie McIntosh, House Bill 898, Operating Budget, Unanticipated Federal Funds, Authorized Uses. Chairwoman McIntosh, please proceed. Ready.
Thank you very much. And thanks. It's wonderful to be on the other side of the committee today. It's good to see you all. Vice Chair Chang and members of the Appropriations Committee. I am very pleased to present to you House Bill 898 titled Operating Budget, Unanticipated Federal Funds, Authorized Use. This is an emergency bill, and it's critical because in anticipation of federal aid, this bill will prohibit the expenditure of specific unanticipated federal funds by budget amendment in the fiscal year 2021 and 2022. This bill's prohibition applies to federal funds that are appropriated by Congress on or after December 14th, 2020, or are part of a grant that is not included in our fiscal year 22 budget books. This prohibition in this bill will not apply to funding for COVID vaccine acquisition, distribution, administration for transit operating costs, funds that increase an appropriation in the fiscal 22 budget that provides funding for authorized uses in the blueprint for Maryland's future, or support eviction assistance or financial support to unemployed individuals. This legislation prohibition does not apply to budget amendments that the Public Works determines are essential public safety, health, welfare, and state protections. And basically, the prohibition in this bill just simply states that other than these expenses, monies that flow through budget amendment should involve this committee and the policy committees of the legislature in determining basically the use and best use or policy around the money that flows through from the federal government that has already come to the state and has not been allocated, and that we anticipate. I want to just stop for a minute and say that the purpose behind this bill is one that I have actually articulated to this committee already this year. What an unusual year this is. And we know it's an unusual year, but here's why it's unusual for us. This year, the budget before us really is made of 3 buckets of money. The COVID relief money that was passed by Congress in December, the budget as submitted by the governor, which, by the way, does not include the money that was already comes from the federal government in December, and the anticipated money, which we have determined as late as last night is on track to be arriving in Maryland and all the other states in the country sometime at the end of March. So we have 3 buckets of money that we are trying to figure out what is the best way to help our state and the families in our state get relief from this pandemic and the COVID crisis and recover. So many businesses, so many families that are affected. And we're trying to take these 3 streams, if you will, of money and combine them in a way that makes the best and most sense. And so in this unusual time, in this very unique time, over these 2 years, this bill would put us, the Appropriations Committee and the other policy committees, put us at a seat at the table in trying to determine what budget amendments what policy must be decided, what budget amendments must be drawn to do the best job for Maryland citizens. This does not, by the way, in any way, take away the governor's ultimate control over the budget until next term, where we have a little bit of say. I want to give you an example, a real example of where we saw this play out during the interim. And I'm going to cite the really great work that our Education and Economics Matters Subcommittee did. Also, and I shouldn't leave out T&E. I mean, all of us did great work, but over the summer, Education and Economic Matters, pardon me, the Economic Subcommittee spent a number of hours trying to get the voices of daycare centers and daycare providers heard in a forum with MSDE. They tried to work out ways in which CARES money could come down and help these daycare providers from literally folding up shop, and what would be the best way to approach distribution of CARES money. When that money came, because we didn't really have a seat at the table, we just had a voice from, let's say, on the other side of the fence, that money was not appropriated in a way that helped many of the daycare providers in the state. And so still there is concern about daycare providers and their ability to stay viable in this climate. More money will be coming to help daycare providers. And we want to make sure that at least the policy decisions around how the money is spent is reflected in the work that we do here in the legislature. Again, it does not take away the governor's ultimate ability to put forth a budget, but it does speak to the unusual circumstances that we find ourselves in now. I also want to conclude by saying that actually, as we speak, there is a model that we could follow that is beginning to evolve here during this legislative session. And it's because we're in session that we have kind of a seat at the table. But in the interim, we won't. And that's when a good bit of this money will begin to flow into Maryland. But right now, I have to tip my hat to Secretary Holt of DHCD, who has received in the December allocation of federal money. We are going to be receiving over $400 million in federal funds for eviction prevention. He has put together and asked the presiding officers to help recommend delegates to sit on a committee that will look at this money, will look at the statewide need on eviction prevention, will look at organizations that are helping eviction prevention and decide how best to spend this money, how to allocate this money, who should get this money, when and how, what are the parameters or guardrails we need to put around this money. Our own delegate, Jazz Lewis, will be representing our committee on that work group, and will be helping to decide very critical decisions that we hope will move quickly and swiftly to help avoid needless evictions during this pandemic. That's a model we need to follow. At the end of the day, that committee will make recommendations to the governor about a budget amendment or set of amendments so that the money will flow with input from our legislative members. That's the model to follow. And this bill wants to set up that kind of model, particularly in areas that are not listed in this bill is critical. We do not want to set up a model of a work group for any kind of federal relief that needs to be expended immediately. But there will be monies that come through that are not targeted that we need to make sure that we have, I want to make sure that we have a say in. So with that, I just ask you to vote favorably on House Bill 898, and I'm very happy to answer any questions. I might mention, by the way, I'm sorry. Also, if you look at page 2 of the fiscal note, if any of you do not recall the current practice on budget amendments, it's quite simply, they put the budget amendment out, and after 45 days, it automatically becomes law. So this would say that we would have some say in the formation of budget amendments, particularly in areas other than the ones that are exempted from the prohibition in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Committee Chairwoman McIntosh, for presenting House Bill 898. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the Chairwoman? Seeing none, it appears that there is no additional testimony for House Bill 898.
May I
Yes, ma'am.
add one thing? There is a letter from, I think it's MDOT, Department of Transportation. One of the areas that we do not want to, we say that we want to not interfere in the flow of money, not have, was transit. They add that we should possibly look, and I would absolutely consider, highway, other kind of uses that they also cover. They're not in opposition of the bill, but just wanted to write a letter of information, and I take their letter seriously. Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman McIntosh, for presenting House Bill 898. And that concludes the bill hearing for this bill. We'll hear House Bill 837.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Appropriations Committee. For the record, my name is Al Carr, and I'm pleased to be here as the lead sponsor of House Bill 837. Ask for your favorable report. House Bill 837 would allow teachers in the Maryland School for the Deaf, or MSD, to enter into collective bargaining negotiations. Currently, teachers and staff are members of the local union, the MSD Faculty and Staff Association, Local 4828, yet they do not have collective bargaining rights. House Bill 837 fills a gap in our labor law by ensuring that these teachers and faculty members have the same rights to collective bargaining enjoyed by all other state professional services employees and K through 12 teachers in Maryland. The Maryland School for the Deaf was founded in 1868 and is a state-run K through 12 school. There are 2 locations in the state, one in Frederick and the other in Columbia. The Columbia School was founded in 1973, where students study through middle school and then transfer to the Frederick location for their high school studies. The school serves students from all across the state. We all have an interest in the school's success. Just as with other teachers across Maryland, MSD faculty and staff are highly qualified and specialized professionals, which should be recognized. This will be accomplished through collective bargaining rights. We've asked a lot of our teachers, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, and MSD teachers are every bit as needed and valuable as other teachers in Maryland. I'm proposing 2 sponsor amendments that will replace teachers with faculty so that all members of the existing union are covered. The same concept applies in support of collective bargaining rights for teachers, applies to the entire faculty. Other witnesses will elaborate on the importance of this bill. Thank you for your consideration, and I ask for your favorable report.
Thank you very much, Delegate Carr, for presenting House Bill 837. The committee will take questions on the House Bill 837, and the gentle lady from Howard County is recognized, Delegate Kittleman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wonder, as I do on others of bills that are to expand collective bargaining, how much data goes behind this? I read there's a teacher who talks about it, and he lists some, anecdotal evidence that it's needed, but I just wondered, has any study been done about the salaries of the teachers at this school versus elsewhere around the state? I just, I always like to know what problem we're solving when we're passing a bill and that there's data behind it. So if you can tell me, that'd be great.
Thank you, Delegate, for that question. I do not have an answer for you. I would like to defer to the other support witnesses. And if we can't answer the question, then we'll certainly follow up with you offline.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we have testimony from 3 people today on the bill. First, we'll hear from Jacqueline Guerres, AFT Local 4828. Then we have Ann Curran, Marin School for the Deaf, and also Deborah Hill, Teacher, School for the Deaf. And they will be providing oral testimony. For all those who are providing testimony today, we have a 2-minute limit on the testimonies. And at the end of when the presentations are done by the panel, then we'll take questions from the committee. Jacqueline Greers, if you're here, please proceed when you're ready.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairwoman McIntosh and Vice Chair Chang and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm Jackie Gears. I'm currently an IEP coordinator at the Columbia campus of the Maryland School for the Deaf, and I'm also the president of AFT Local 4828. I also submitted a written testimony, and we also have submitted written testimonies from other members as well in support of this bill, favorable with amendments. This bill would align our school with other K-12 public institutions in this state and grant us collective bargaining rights. I have been employed at MSD for almost 14 years. Primarily at Columbia campus. I taught elementary age students for about 9 years at various grade levels. And then at the end of my 10th year, I was asked if I could fill the role as an IEP coordinator, and I've been an IEP coordinator now for almost 4 years. So we take public school students from very different backgrounds from all across the state. Some who have been in school since they were 3, others who have joined us later. And we have public school students attending both Frederick and Columbia campus from every county in Maryland. They are all deaf or hard of hearing, and they may also have additional needs, and every child over the age of 3 has an IEP. So we are very much like other public schools across the state. I am state certified. All of our teachers have to follow the same procedures for certification set by MSDE. We have the same requirements. But for some reason, our teachers and our non-supervisory faculty do not work under the protections of a collectively bargained union contract. So we're hoping to correct this mistake with this bill. So I'm very proud of being an MSD employee. I really enjoy working there, but I have noticed over the years that we have lost a lot of good quality educators because they go to jobs where the benefits and the job protections are more solidified. And we also enthusiastically support the passage of Kerwin, but we're just not sure if those provisions would be afforded to us. So that again would have to be proposed by law to be bargained collectively. So passing this bill would go a long way to see that our school would provides vital educational services to the Maryland deaf and hard of hearing students, that we are not treated differently than any other public school in the state. So I really do urge a favorable with amendments report for House Bill 837. And I do want to answer Delegate Kittleman's question. It's my understanding MSD follows the salary scales, Frederick County and Howard County. Since we have Columbia campus in Howard County and Frederick campus in Frederick County, they take those salary scales and they average them. And that's how our salaries are determined. But I can tell you it is my 14th year and I am on step 5. So that is one of the many reasons why we are asking for this bill, because our educators and our specialists are grossly underpaid and underappreciated. And that would be one thing that we would like to address with this bill.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Gears. And also you've provided the committee written testimony. Next, we'll hear oral testimony favorable with amendments from Ms. Ann Curran. If you're going to mute yourself, Ms. Curran, if you're going to mute yourself.
Yes, I've a year of Zoom meetings and I'm still not good at that. I am the HR director for the Maryland School for the Deaf. I've been with the school for 20 years, and I've been the HR director for 12 years now. And we look forward to having an opportunity to be a premier employer in the state of Maryland. So we, in principle, have no qualms or problems in supporting collective bargaining. We did not have an opportunity to ever speak with the writers of the bill, so we weren't really sure what the intent was. So I wasn't sure what to prepare for today. The interesting thing is that the school is a school primarily. We're also a state agency. So we follow state personnel and pensions, and our budget is approved by the General Assembly and through the governor. If he chooses not to put steps in for state employees, our teachers are stuck. That's why Ms. Gears is at the level where she is. It's the setup. In 1992, there was a bill passed that allowed for us to not keep our faculty members on the state pay plan, because then we would have never been able to keep teachers. And that's how the process we have of using Frederick County and Howard County public school salaries and come up with the average and then do that for our teachers came about. That's reviewed every 3 years. We don't always get funded in the first year for the full salary. So sometimes we have to do half of it the first year, the other half the second year. We have to kind of move things around in the budget to make it happen. But while they don't move up in steps, they do get pay increases if the collective bargaining groups in the public schools have managed to increase the salaries. So I think it would be wonderful to have another group of people to talk to about how we can manage all of this. Health benefits, retirement benefits, all of that is the same as any state employee because we are a state agency. So we have some good and some bad, as all employers do. I did have 2 concerns, and one of them seems to be addressed today. As written, the bill did say that it was for teachers, and the majority of our BIPOC population at the school, the greatest diversity is in our support staff. And I was very concerned that if it stayed as is, it would once again look like we support only giving increases or better benefits to the white staff and not to the more diverse staff. So I would love to see an amendment to that.
Okay, Ms.
The
Curran,
other
if you could
concern,
summarize,
Yes.
your second concern. Thank you.
my only other concern is that this will probably mean more work on the HR department, which is already bogged down with a lot of payroll stuff, and I only have 5 people, including myself, on the team. We would like to not have an unfunded mandate. We really need an extra person in HR to be able to handle all the employee relation work that will come with this. That's the end of my testimony. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Curran. And also do we have Ms. Deborah Hill? Has Ms. Deborah Hill joined us today?
We have not seen her enter the waiting room.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ms. Wareheim. Well, we'll take questions from members of the committee for the panel. Delegate Grice is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Usually, if you have a workplace where, even if it's hostile, or if employees are grossly underpaid, whether it's their salary or just their entire their entire compensation package, you have a lot of turnover if that's the case. And is that the case in your organization, where you're constantly hiring and folks are constantly leaving because they're just not happy? And if they do leave, do you do exit interviews? We
do exit interviews. Salary is sometimes a condition of people leaving. Got to understand that our staff are highly skilled because they teach in ASL. So they have two languages, they're English and American Sign Language speakers. And we lose out often to California, which has 2 campuses and much higher salaries. But a big part of the reason why we lose staff is a totally different subject that we have discussed with the Department of Education, and that's the certification requirements, which are not favorable to our deaf teachers. And it makes it almost impossible for them to become certified in the proper amount of time. Very unfair questions in praxis and other concerns. So there's a mixture of turnover.
I hate to interrupt, but Debbie Hill is in the waiting room. She's not able to enter this meeting for some reason, and we do have another person to testify on behalf of this bill favorable with amendments. Her name is Edna Johnson. So I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to let you know that Debbie Hill is, for some reason, the link that was sent to her is not working.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Gears. If we could, Ms. Johnson, thank you very much for being here. Ms. Johnson, if you could have 2 minutes to present your testimony. Yes.
All right, just the captioner here. The host has to assign me as
Hello, everyone.
captioner.
Okay, excuse me.
What's wrong?
Okay,
If
Ms.
the
Johnson,
It's my understanding that has been done.
The captioner is trying to connect.
okay.
Can
Apparently,
you have, I don't see it. I have to copy the API token.
Okay, let's tell you what. Do we have any other questions from members of the committee? Delegate Kilman, did you have a question? If you could unmute.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify from my understanding. I did see that one of the issues, and I appreciate Ms. Gross talking about my question, is the fact that the steps don't seem to be catching up with the actual number of years people work there. And my question is simply, is that something that is, you know, Ms. Kern, what you said, that's caused by the way the state does or does not fund them, or is it the policy of the school?
No, it has nothing to do with the school policy. It is strictly if state employees don't get a step increase, we don't get step increases for any of our staff members.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the gentlelady from Prince George's County is recognized, Delegate Proctor. If you're going to mute yourself, Delegate Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for Ms. Curran. You mentioned that under, I don't remember exactly what statute you were using, but you said that only the white people teachers would get raises. Would you explain that to me?
It's not a statute. What I'm saying is that the largest population of diversity at our school, and this is something we're working to change, but it's the teacher aides, the paraprofessionals, the skilled service people. They are the ones that represent the most amount of diversity at the school. Most of our teachers are white. And so the perception, should we not include our teacher aides and paraprofessionals in this bill, would be that we are supporting increases for the white staff and the few minority teachers, but that the majority of the BIPOC community was not thought of and not included in this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Johnson, we will be with you in one moment. We have been able to get technology to have the caption ready. So we're going to take one more question from Delegate Geraldine Valentino-Smith, and then we will hear testimony from you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you for your patience, and thank you everyone for their patience as we've been working out the caption feed. Delegate Valentino-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Curran, in the
DHS budget subcommittee, we just heard the budget for the disability administration. One of the main issues that's been circulating in Maryland is that we are one of the only states that doesn't have a clear certification or licensure process. Is that somehow in any of this?
The licensing process does go through and they do have advanced certified teachers, and they've got levels, and it depends on the praxis that tests you take, where you teach. But what we're finding is that our teachers are able to take the classes. They have more than enough graduate credits to be highly skilled and highly qualified, but the praxis tests themselves are not deaf friendly. And so I have teachers who have to take the tests over and over and over again.
But here in Maryland, we don't have for sign language.
Correct.
Interpreters. We're one of the only states that does not have a defined certified licensure process, correct?
There is a hard of hearing specialty, but there is nothing special for American Sign Language. My teachers are all supposed to be certified in special ed.
Okay, so thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Delegate Valentina Smith, for your question. An announcement to the committee members and to the public that we are in gallery view for the interpreters to be accessible to the public. So just want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. So closed caption is available. We will now go back to Miss Edna Johnson. Miss Edna, thank you so much for your patience, ma'am. We really appreciate it. And Miss Johnson, please proceed when you're ready.
Before I begin, because of the interpreter having lag time and processing time, is it possible for me to be permitted to speak for 3 minutes in lieu of
Yes,
2
ma'am.
minutes?
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
of the language?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And may I be pinned, please? I'll keep it short and sweet. I am alumni of Maryland School for the Deaf, and my name is Edna T. Johnson, and I ask that you vote favorable with amendment to House Bill 837, which would include more people in this group rather than just the teachers, everyone else, as Ms. Curran had mentioned. Thank you, Ms. Curran, for mentioning that. I'm a proud alumni of the Maryland School for the Deaf, and I have been teaching there for 15 years. I am state certified in 2 different fields and a third one in ASL, but that's not recognized by the state. I teach a variety of classes: English Lit, composition, comparative languages, high school and middle department, as well as ACE, early childhood education. We've been working without pay this summer to expand the curriculum for American Sign Language. We do it because we love and we care for the Maryland School for the Deaf and our deaf students. We're passionate for our students. And I want to make sure that we all have a bargaining rights. I think that would be equivalent to any other school system in the state of Maryland. Oftentimes, teachers and staff are overqualified with more specialties, more certificates, more certifications than other schools in the state of Maryland, and we are underpaid. It seems a little ironic. This bill will then help bring us into equity pay. We're not asking for additional or more pay. There's also a reason the teachers and the staff at the Maryland School for the Deaf use 2 languages every single day. We are bilingual. We use different modalities. I don't speak. I'm using the interpreter. You see Jackie, she had some hearing loss, but she spoke. So we have all kinds of deaf and hard of hearing individuals, special needs children, and we all meet the needs of our students. And that's the beauty of our Maryland School for the Deaf. Some kids can speak with their voice, some can't. Some use 1 language, some use 2 languages, some are fluent in American Sign Language. And I think it's critical that I mention that oftentimes they will have a comorbid. You heard that correctly. It's odd, but yes, often this happens. when you have a person with a disability, they may also have depression, ADHD, ASD, and various other syndromes. It means that the teacher and the staff must know how to interact with all of these different learning styles, different languages, modalities, the different backgrounds. Maryland, the children come from the whole state of Maryland, not just our Frederick and Columbia areas. I'm going to be closing soon. Many of our students are also language deprived, and that is very preventable. 80% of those families who have deaf children do not sign with their own children. This is one big reason why children come to our school delayed in language. So we make up for that. We do a lot of IEPs, which is doubling our load. And that's one of the reasons that many of the teachers quit. And there's a high turnover at the Maryland School for the Deaf. Right now, there's a shortage and a crisis. 500 people are needed to meet the need of deaf education. So, and then of course you have people who are retiring. We become very protective of our students and our schools. Let me turn the page here. And that's pretty much encapsulated. And what I'm asking for is just equal, not special treatment, but equal treatment for our teachers and staff. I'm asking for funding and a favorable report with amendments to this House Bill 837. Thank you very much for listening.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Edna Johnson, thank you very much for your testimony, and also Ms. Interpreter Brenda Kelly-Frey, appreciate it. Thank you very much. We'll take questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for Ms. Edna Johnson, if there are any. Seeing none, thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and thank you to the Office of Information Systems for helping with the caption, and thank you to all the interpreters who are here this afternoon. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 837. We'll now move on to House Bill 786, that is sponsored by the Ways and Means Chairwoman Ann Kaiser. And on her behalf, we have Ms. Madison Long, who is an intern for the Chairwoman, presenting House Bill 786, Department of Human Services, Maryland Department of Health, and Department of Education, easing access to family support programs. Ms. Long, please proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for allowing me to come before you today and testify in support of House Bill 786. This bill would require multiple Maryland departments to work together to identify and alleviate the administrative burdens of family support programs. Complicated forms and confusing methods make eligibility for programs difficult to understand. A family may not have the knowledge of programs they could benefit from, nor the time or resources to apply. The Benefits Coordination Portal, Maryland Think, was created with the purpose of reducing application hassle and establishing a no wrong door system for benefits. However, it is not currently providing the services it has been promising for many years. Additional oral and written testimony will explain these issues in further detail and explain the real challenges that accompany our different benefit programs. We have great programs in the state of Maryland, but they do not provide their intended purpose unless people are aware and understand them. With the ongoing pandemic, the need for aid is only amplified. Therefore, it is crucial to ensure that every resident who may qualify is not only informed of their eligibility, but can also apply for benefits without stress. Maryland families deserve a simple, easy, and effective system to receive the assistance they need. Please support a favorable report on House Bill 786. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Long. And Committee Chairwoman Kaiser, thank you for being here today. We really appreciate you being here. We will take questions.
Mr. Vice Chair, I just want to thank you and to everyone.
Yes,
Maddie was my student last semester and earned an A. I'm not an easy A, and now my intern this semester. So thank you for listening to her today.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We have questions from members of the committee, recognizing the gentleman from Montgomery County, Delegate Mark Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to wish the proud intern coordinator a happy birthday. Today is her birthday, so happy birthday, Chair Kaiser.
Thank you, Delegate Corman.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. Are there any other questions from members of the committee, the sponsor or the sponsor's intern? Seeing none, okay, we will hear several testimonies that are in favor of this bill. I have all of them, so I'll read their names and then we'll hear from them and then we'll take questions from the committee. First, we have Ms. Reagan Vaughn with Welfare Advocates in favor of the bill, both written and oral testimony. We also have Cheryl Bose with the Maryland State Education Association providing oral testimony, and Ms. Robin McKinney, Cash Campaign of Maryland, providing both written and oral testimony. Ms. Reagan Vaughn, thank you for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. I am Regan Vaughn. I'm the Director of Advocacy at Catholic Charities and here today representing Welfare Advocates. We fully support HB 786 and any effort to make it easier for Marylanders to access the wide range of benefits that we do offer in Maryland. As with a lot of things you're going to hear about this year, the pandemic really shined a light and exacerbated access issues. And I'm sure you and your staff lived through that this summer with constituents calling to try to access those benefits. But this isn't a new issue. My first session was in 2010, and I remember lobbying Delegate Haynes to put in JCR language asking for a report on a no wrong door. And he did put that language in for us. And we met for 2 years and delivered a 44-page report on how to solve this issue. I still have the report, happy to share it with anyone. Unfortunately, like most good work group reports, it ended up on a shelf because we were promised that technology was going to solve this. A health exchange was going to solve it. We saw what happened with the health exchange. My DHR came up and that was going to be a stopgap measure. And it has helped, but not completely. And now we have Maryland Think rolling out this summer, which again has been promised as a solution. Maryland Think stands for Maryland's Total Human Services Integrated Network. In theory, it should be a way for all of our social services agencies to work together to share information. But we've already been told to lower our expectations for what Maryland Think's gonna look like at rollout. And so I really think this bill is necessary to help us keep track of what's happening so that we truly can be a one-stop shop in Maryland. And so I hope that working with the sponsor and with the committee, we can reframe the bill a little bit through the lens of MD Think. You heard that in Madison's testimony, that they're willing to look at that and just to make sure that we truly do get a one-stop shop in Maryland, so that your constituents, our clients, can apply for benefits and get the benefits that they're eligible for and do it in one place and not through 5 different departments. So I would urge a favorable report on HB 786. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vaughn, for being here in your testimony. Just a reminder to the rest of the panel, there's a 2-minute time limit, so we'd appreciate it. Next, from the Maryland State Education Association, Ms. Cheryl Bose. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chang and members of the committee. It's great to be here this afternoon. I am Cheryl Bose. I'm a 4th and 5th grade teacher from Baltimore County, serving as the president for the Maryland State Education Association, representing over 75,000 educators across Maryland. As a 4th grade teacher for many years in a Title I school, I can tell you that this is a game-changing piece of legislation for our parents and our students, especially those living in low poverty or homeless. You've heard the statement, students must Maslow before they bloom. If you don't know what this means that our students have to have their basic needs met so that they can be ready to learn, ready to have their nourishment, to have safety, to have their health needs met. This puts all of that in one place. Many of our parents come into our front office. I watched it for years. All of their paperwork is in mom's purse, especially for many in our homeless community. All of their belongings are in that one place. And it becomes like an IKEA directions to put something together, to go and fill out this form and that form and other forms. And we as teachers try to collect all those forms and go back and tell people what might be missing. If they could do that in one place, we could then more easily meet the needs of our students and our families. It's also the goal of our community schools. We see when we bring services to one location, we can truly help so many more students be able to be ready for learning. So on behalf of the educators across this state who serve to help and educate, but help the families of our students, we urge a favorable report for this piece of legislation, and thank Chair Kaiser for putting it forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bose, for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Robin McKinney, Cash Campaign of Maryland.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Robin McKinney. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Cash Campaign of Maryland. Cash stands for Creating Assets, Savings, and Hope. We help to provide screening and navigation assistance for public benefits, free tax preparation, financial education, and coaching to over 27,000 residents across the state. More than half of the folks we work with earn less than $20,000, with many earning less than 10. We annually serve in Baltimore City alone about 500 residents for benefit screening. This year, our demand is up about 30%, but we're not able to serve as many people because every case is taking 3 times longer. We recently launched a partnership with Baltimore County where people can call 311 and just to get navigation assistance help because they were getting so many calls, and those calls go to our staff. And every case is so complex that it's really taking us an incredibly long time to unpack all of these different benefits. As Ms. Vaughn was talking about of technology being seen as the solution, we use something called Earn Benefits that works with my DHR that also, is supposed to be a one-stop shop, but we find ourselves spending hours and hours on the phone with the clients trying to help them with different information. So just a few client stories from the last couple weeks. We had a single mom with a toddler who went from having two part-time jobs to one because of COVID, and now is having significant issues paying her rent and utilities. She's already getting SNAP, but she experienced a hiccup in her service and has at this point been waiting for over a month just to get the forms to fill out to get emergency assistance for families with children in the mail. We're seeing same issues with people getting benefits denied because they said that the documentation wasn't received on time. We have issues with the mail, we have issues with the process, and then we have issues with technology. The digital divide is very real, and a lot of these systems don't talk to each other. And so it's incredibly complicated for us, much less for our clients in order to navigate all of these different issues. One of the other reasons that we are supporting this legislation is we work a lot on the earned income tax credit and making sure that we get information out about that credit, just like other benefits, is really important. And what we have found, especially in the last year, is there's a really set of confusing public messages that are going out. A new benefit will be released or a new process, and by the time it trickles down to the support agencies, it's changed several times, or it's announced that this is available but not who's eligible. So then people like us get flooded with calls, whether it's about PEBT or renter eviction prevention, and all the eligibility information isn't out yet. And so then unfortunately, people just become incredibly frustrated and get stuck in the system and aren't able to figure out what to do. And lastly, in closing, the other thing I just wanted to mention is I just hope that this group works closely with groups like Catholic Charities, with welfare advocates, with other groups who provide this, because we're the ones who are on the front line who are taking a lot of these customer service complaints. So with that, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 876.
Thank you very much, Ms. McKinney, for your presentation. Also, just wanted to check in with Ms. Madison Long one more time to see if there were any additional comments you wanted to provide. Great. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for this panel? Seeing none, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. That concludes the hearing for House Bill 786. Next, we will turn to House Bill 844, Delegate Learman, State Retirement and Pension Systems Fiduciary Insurance. Delegate Learman, thank you so much for being here, and please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, Appropriations Committee. This is a bill that I'm bringing on behalf of the department, the State Retirement and Pensions Committee, as the chair of the Joint Committee on Pensions. So this is a bill that will codify existing practice. Decades ago, We passed legislation ensuring that all fiduciaries of the system fiduciaries, are bonded so that if they do something illegal, we can make sure to recover. And for the past few years, we have been, the state treasurer has had insurance rather than a bond. And when SRPS looked into whether we should have a bond, they discovered that it would be nearly impossible and wouldn't actually serve the function that it is intended to. So this just codifies existing practice, saying that all system fiduciaries will be insured and that the state treasurer will be in consultation with the Board of Trustees, will determine the type and the amount of coverage that will be provided by policy. So I ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegate Learman, for presenting the bill. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Delegate Learman on the bill? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, we'll hear testimony from two individuals who are providing favorable testimony. We have from the State Retirement Agency, Ms. Ann Gothrop and Mr. Dean Kennardine with the agency. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to thank the sponsor, Delegate Learman, for introducing the legislation in the Joint Committee. She did a great job explaining it. If you all have any questions for the agency, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Gothrop. And Mr. Kennardine would like to provide testimony.
Also here to answer questions if there are any. And I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of one of our members of the Board of Trustees, Mr. Doug Browdy, who represents the active teachers of the state of Maryland on the Board of Trustees.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Prouty, for being here. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the panel? Seeing none, thank you very much. This concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 844. Next, we'll move to House Bill 858. Delegate Hornberger, Higher Education Active Duty Law Enforcement Officers Tuition Exemption. Delegate Hornberger, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. For the record, Delegate Kevin Hornberger here on behalf of HB 858, Higher Education Active Duty Law Enforcement Officers Tuition Exemption. What this bill seeks to do is to provide a sort of GI-esque bill for our active law enforcement and throughout the state. I was approached by my sheriff's office, and he was a graduate of Towson. And he said that many of his officers would like to pursue higher education. However, because the income of an officer is not competitive as it should be, many of them were struggling with tuition cost or the ability to go to school. And, I thought on that for some time. And as you all know, here recently, we've had a lot of what I will say, folks that feel that we should defund law enforcement, that we should change law enforcement. Well, I'm happy to say that I do support law enforcement. And for those folks that feel that law enforcement should be changed or law enforcement should be improved upon, I think we can all agree that education is the key to answering a lot of those questions. And frankly, officers want to be able to get a degree. They want to be able to matriculate. They want to pursue that associate's or baccalaureate degree. What this bill would do was it would allow all enforcement, whether they be municipal, whether they be county, state, etc., to be able to attend school, and it actually narrowcast it down to 3 groups of degree programs. Those degree programs are conflict resolution, community relations, and criminal justice. Okay, just those 3. There is already a precedent in Maryland for exempting certain groups from tuition. And those include waivers for foster care, homeless, disabled, seniors, etc. This would just be adding a new cohort into that, and it would be just for these degree programs. I think that this is a common sense bill, and this is the right time to pass something like this. It'll allow our officers to pursue higher ed and at the end of the day, make them better community servants. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Delegate Hornberger, for presenting the bill. Chair, the gentleman from Baltimore County is recognized, the chairman of Baltimore County delegation, Delegate Pat Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing the legislation before us. Question, I know we have a lot of former military members that serve in law enforcement. Is there anything in the bill provision associated with if you already have an education benefit that would cover all the costs of school, if there would be necessarily a need for them to then benefit from this. I know it's a little specific. I'm just trying to connect dots here.
Sure. If you take a look at the fiscal note, it does speak to some of those exempted groups. Active military are currently eligible for in-state tuition, regardless of their duty station. As long as they are serving here, they are eligible for in-state tuition, which is reduced. And if this committee sees it necessary to add them on, that's fine. But keep in mind, they do get a federal benefit, which I mentioned earlier is the GI Bill. Active duty officers do not.
Sure. And sorry, in the nature of my question, we can talk after this too, is that if you have a vet that's coming back and they have GI Bill benefits, that would cover cost of school. And I know that many of the folks that I worked with when I was at Towson, when right from the military into law enforcement, they don't have that same burden. I see what you're trying to do. I'm just saying, like, is in terms of fiscally being responsible for folks that don't have a benefit whatsoever, and those folks that may have one, if that's being considered whatsoever in the language of the bill.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things we were trying to do, if you read the fiscal note, it's kind of nebulous because all it can do is really speculate how many active duty police officers we have. It's hard to draw conclusions on how many of them would opt into this program, especially with only those 3 realms of learning. So we tried to narrowcast this as much as possible. And I'm certainly open to attaching a study or a sunset to that to garner what the real fiscal impact is. But I just think opening the doors of education will go a long way with all of the tension that we have now.
Sure. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady from Prince George's County recognized, Delegate Proctor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I think the bill itself sounds great. It's wonderful for anyone to have an opportunity to get more education. I would like to make a statement. I served as a trustee on the community college board, and I just want this body to know that each time we received another group that was going to get educated without having to pay tuition, it was how are we going to adjust the budget? How are we going to do this? So I do want you to think about that, and if you could send some money with that,
yes,
that would be great.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, if I might add, MAC has included a letter of support with amendment. They support the spirit of this bill. However, they would love for there to be a funding mechanism attached to it. And Delegate Proctor, thank you for your service on that board. Our community colleges are important. And we're definitely open to attaching any funding stream to do a hold harmless on our community colleges.
Great. Are there any other questions from members of the committee for the sponsor? Seeing none, there is also written testimony from several organizations in our briefing. There's a Maryland Chief of Police and Maryland Sheriff Association, Maryland Troopers Association, also FOP Lodge 89 and Maryland State Lodge. So that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 858. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much.
If we could take a pause for a second in the committee, we have joined back with us today is Delegate Rick Metzger. Delegate Metzger, it's good to see you. We hope that you are doing well. So yeah, let's give him a hand.
Thank you so much. Bless your hearts. I'm getting stronger every day, but I could not miss. I cannot miss a meeting. I've never missed a committee meeting. I've never missed a caucus, and it broke my heart the other day not to be in the chambers with you. But my heart was with you guys. So thank you so much.
Well, it's good to see you, Delegate Metzger, and we're glad you're back. You've been in our hearts and our thoughts. So next we move to House Bill 436, presented by Delegate Smith, Enoch Pratt, Free Library, Operating Hours and Funding. Delegate Smith, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also just thank you to the full Appropriations Committee. Always happy to join you all. I'm here to beg your attention to and hopefully support for House Bill 436. It's concerning an extension of funding for the Enoch Pratt Library System, which I know many of you are familiar with, the oldest in the country. And I just want to note that during this pandemic, I think that without question, our educational system, our recreation centers, and our libraries have been part of that civic fabric that has really been there for so many of us during a very challenging time. And with that in mind, House Bill 436 would require the governor to continue to provide a $3 million appropriation beginning in fiscal year 2023 to support additional operating expenses for branches of the Enoch Pratt Library System. And the General Assembly, the intent behind this originally was to ensure that there was additional access to these library facilities and programs, particularly in communities of higher need, to ensure that there were more flexibility around hours of operation and things of that nature. I am, excited to share with you once she gets the opportunity to present the information on behalf of Enoch Pratt Library, that it's not just, the librarians in our system and residents of Baltimore City that see great value in continuing the funding of these efforts. It's also something that is supported by those in the profession across the state. So I appreciate the solidarity. And as we continue to navigate a challenging time, it's important that we stand up the Enoch Pratt Library System to continue to stand in the gap as it pertains to Wi-Fi support and providing access to people who are looking for employment, need access to a lot of resources that sometimes they do not have at their home. And there's also additional resources that are sometimes centralized through Enoch Pratt, such as lawyer in the library and social worker in the library. And I know you'll hear more about that in other testimony, but I just wanted to lift up my great thanks to this body for seeing fit to provide this funding initially. And I think that you'll see that it's there's a continued need to continue this. And I just want to lift up for those who are unfamiliar with this funding situation, that it does require a match from Baltimore City of $750,000. So I just want to bring that to your attention. But I do not want to belabor my points, because you're going to hear from people better positioned than I to really share the good work of the Enoch Pratt Library System and what this work can mean with continued funding. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for the hard work you're doing on behalf of all Marylanders. And I hope that you'll see it fit to support House Bill 436. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Delegate Smith. And we have questions from members of the committee. First, we will take a question from the gentlelady from Howard County, Delegate Kittleman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I am very strong proponent of libraries, as Delegate Hill can testify to, being from Howard County and Carroll County, both of which have great library systems. And I read in the testimony that there will be data showing increases in the use of the library and everything else, which I found very, very interesting. And maybe the question that I have would be better directed there. But the one thing that I would like to know is a correlation between the increase in the use of the library and the expanded hours. I remember when this originally came up, I think it was our chairman's bill, and it was passed that it expanded the hours dramatically. And I was really curious if people actually use the library during those expanded hours. So I don't know if you know, or if I should hold that. And before we go, I also would just like to ask, the original bill was passed as a mandate. Now, sometimes mandates aren't funded because of financial reasons, but I'm not sure how this bill really, I mean, since we are to mandate, this isn't over and above the 3 million, I don't believe.
No, it's repealing a sunset, essentially. Thank you. Sorry for not clear there, Delegate.
Thank you very much.
But to your previous question, I do believe that the head of the Enoch Pratt Library System has more data at her fingertips that can speak to that. But we do know as recently as fiscal year 2019, there were increases. So I don't want to steal her thunder, Delegate Kittleman, because she's a little closer to the data, but I appreciate the question.
Yes, we have with us joining today Ms. Heidi Daniel, who is the CEO of the Enoch Pratt Library. We'll hear from her after we take a question from Delegate Greist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to recall why this bill was passed to begin with, and also why there was a sunset. Was the library in financial trouble before? And is that the reason why we spent the $3 million on the short term to help, I guess, bail the library out? I'm trying to recall that. And then my second question is, generally libraries are funded, at least the operating budget, they're funded with entirely by local government. I don't know. I'm not aware if there's any other libraries anywhere in the state where there's a line item in the state budget to help them in their operating costs. Is that correct?
I can't speak to the other libraries line items, so I don't want to, give you misinformation.
Sure.
But to your prior that this is really about the expansion of hours. To your point, we do fund much of the regular programming of the library, but this was really about providing the opportunity for expanded access, particularly because there were some libraries that really didn't have sustainable or regular weekend access in certain, late hours. And we realized that particularly in communities where there are a lot of young people, a lot of people that are needing additional supports, just having the inability to access a building that serves as a potential resource in the community was not necessarily allowing the fullness of the library to be accessible to all Baltimore City residents. But I do want to note that despite the fact that it obviously located in Baltimore, the Enoch Pratt Library System in general does serve as a hub of sorts of a lot of activity for the profession writ large and across Maryland.
Right. So I guess my follow-up question to that, why was there a sunset on this bill to begin with? Was there a commitment by Baltimore City that after the sunset expires that they would cover those costs, or was it just to get the bill passed? I'm trying to understand why we put a sunset on that bill to begin with.
I do not have that actual information at my fingertips. I wish the original sponsor was here. Unfortunately, they're not here at this precise moment. So I will not just, pontificate without real information. But I just want to note that in the bill, it does require $750,000 match from Baltimore in order for this to happen.
Thank you.
The gentleman from the city of Baltimore is recognized, Delegate Keith Haynes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And always good to see my colleague from Baltimore City, Chair of Baltimore City Delegation. Just by way of information in the form of a question. At one point in time, a few years back, the city of Baltimore experienced a situation with civil unrest centered around the Freddie Gray uprisings and the death of Freddie Gray. At that time, the Baltimore City delegation and the speaker at that time, Speaker Bush, worked together to look at how the state could be helpful to the citizens of Baltimore and providing opportunities to the citizens of Baltimore through the Freddie Gray crisis. Expanding the library system in their hours of operation, along with other areas in our schools as well, was one of the outgrowths of that initiative. It has continued to work very well and has expanded actually in scope, as the sponsor of the legislation has indicated, into a more comprehensive hub of outreach for the citizens of Baltimore. Isn't that true, Madam Chair? Smith.
Yes, sorry, I was fumbling around with mute. That is correct. And that was a masterful just turn of phrase and odyssey, linguistic odyssey you took us on to get us the information that we needed. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the bill's sponsor? Seeing none this afternoon, we are joined by Ms. CEO Heidi Daniel and also Mr. Gordon Crabb from the Enoch Pratt Free Library. CEO Daniel, please proceed when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the committee for having me today. Thank you to Delegate Smith for your introduction. I'm going to hopefully answer some of the questions that came up from Delegate Grist as well as Delegate Kittleman and elaborate on some of the points already made. Thank you for having me here. I'm Heidi Daniel. I'm the CEO of the Enoch Pratt Free Library. 5 years ago, the legislature saw fit to pass this expanded hours bill, which was championed by Speaker Bush, as well as members of the House, of this committee, and of the Senate. And that was in light of the unrest from Freddie Gray, in which the library chose to stay open during that time, even as other organizations around us shut their doors, so that we could provide a haven to our city and to our community. So since that time, when the legislation was first passed to provide this funding, the expanded hours bill has allowed us a 30% increase in our hours across the entire system. It's stabilized our hours across the city and allowed the Enoch Pratt Free Library to offer 6 days of service at all of our branches and 7 days of service at our central branch, which is also the State Library Resource Center. So one of the other things I would just touch on is that the Enoch Pratt Free Library is not just the Baltimore City Public Library, it is also the State Library Resource Center for the state of Maryland. So in addition to the expanded hours, we did see more hours given to our Pennsylvania Avenue and our North Avenue branch, which is right in the hub of the area where Freddie Gray was, where the incidents occurred around the uprising, as well as our Southeast Anchor Library on the east side of the city in the Highlandtown neighborhood, and our Central Library. They all received extra evening hours. Feedback from our community members and users have been overwhelmingly positive, and the extra hours allow the library to offer the community more hours with social workers and with lawyers, after school programming, job assistance, and usage of our meeting room. Pratt has seen increases in material usage, increases in program attendance, and in visits across the system. During FY19, which was the last full year that our expanded hours were implemented, Pratt neighborhood library branches saw a 9-year high in material usage, and it turned around a long downward trend that we were seeing. Across neighborhood libraries, we saw increases in program attendance, 5 to 7% per year, increases in visits, and a 15% increase in FY19 in library card registrations. The upward trend was on track to continue during FY20 with the completion of the historic Central Library branch. But of course, COVID-19 interrupted our progress. But during that time, we were seeing an almost 12% daily increase over the previous year of FY19. Although COVID-19 shuttered our doors, the work of the Enoch Pratt Free Library continued, as did the city's need and the state's need for our services. During these times, we have offered sidewalk service at all of our locations. We have offered online programs, many in partnership with our state libraries around the state, curriculum support materials for students all across the state. And in addition, the Pratt Library services a city where almost 40% of households lack reliable internet access. I know you've heard about some of those challenges already. To help with addressing this, the Pratt Library started the following initiatives. We started drive-in Wi-Fi at 8 of our locations. We have community Wi-Fi where we put hotspots on our mobile units and we drive around the city to provide connectivity. We lend hotspots, we lend Chromebooks. We specifically started lending hotspots and Chromebooks for an extended period of time in the area around the Pennsylvania Avenue, North Avenue branch. And we combined that specifically with the assistance of staff to help create technology plans, career roadmaps, and support groups so users can support each other.
If you could summarize for us, please.
I'm sorry?
You could summarize for us, please.
Oh, yes, summarize. So we also operate Sailor Network, which provides infrastructure for libraries all across the state for IT network support. And we also have a letter of support from one of our colleagues to indicate that. So in addition, the expanded funding continues this work of the Pratt, allows us to continue the work of the State Library Resource Center. And in closing, I would request a favorable report on HB 436.
Great, thank you very much, Madam CEO. And we also have Mr. Gordon Crabb. Would you like to provide any comments?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Chang and members of the
2-minute time limit, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and members of the committee. I just one of the questions that Delegate Grist brought up had to do with how local library systems are funded. So I wasn't sure if he and the rest of the committee was aware that the Maryland's unlike a lot of states that has a state library. So Ms. Daniel already pointed that out. But all local libraries receive local library aid. And that is a formula that takes into account wealth of the jurisdiction. And so Baltimore City, being one of the poorer jurisdictions in the state, would receive a little more funding than perhaps Montgomery County, for example. But the goal there is to help support local libraries. And it's been very important that this funding be incorporated as part of that library aid formula. And it has created increased excitement, satisfaction with customers. It's allowed our library to be similar to all of the surrounding jurisdictions, which have been open 6 or 7 days a week for years. Prior to this, we were open 5 days a week in most locations, which limited access for workforce development, for using our libraries for public discourse, for programs. And I would just thank you all again and ask for a favorable report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crabb. And we'll take questions from members of the committee. First, Delegate Mangione is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the gentleman, Mr. Crabb, kind of answered that, I guess. Or could you just explain, because I didn't know whether Delegate Rice, I just didn't know enough about it, if the funding comes from the state or doesn't, because well, I'll just let you answer that first, please.
Yes, the $3 million comes from the state in the form of library aid to Baltimore City. And there's $750,000 that Baltimore City had to include as a match to that funding. And so the total of $3,750,000 is what's allowed us to expand hours and services.
Okay, I was just confused because the other Delegate Haynes had mentioned something, and I think Madam the CEO had mentioned something about the Freddie Gray, what happened there, and whether that was a reason. I guess was that part of the reason as to why this initial funding started?
That was part of the motivation, because the goal there of the General Assembly was to try to help Baltimore City out of that situation. And so one of the things they looked to was, how could we help Baltimore City? And the way they settled on was, we can help them in terms of more access to services for Baltimore City. And as it turned out, the state.
Okay, and just because of my concern, or and just make sure I'm clear, because I don't want to say something that's not accurate, is so they would, I'm trying to get to the money that would come to the library regardless of what happened during the Freddie Gray incident, because whether we don't want to relive that, I'm not saying justified or not, but the fact is what happened was a riot. And to justify more spending because of something that happened that we all can disagree with, I find that troublesome, because if that was the case, unless I just want to make sure clear that other parts of the state are also getting this library funding rather than through a locality, because then Delegate Rice couldn't, again, not trying to sound crazy, but if something went down in his part of the state, in that district, do we justify by spending more money sending it for the library system because something happened that shouldn't have happened? So I just wanted to make sure clear of how the funding mechanism works for the library, because I have no doubt that incredible work is being done in those at the PROC system. I get that and applaud everybody. I just wanted to make sure I was clear that that's not the only reason that money, almost $3 million is a lot of money. So I just wanted to clear that up, and you did help. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Delegate Grice is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do apologize. I don't know if I misspoke or not, but I did actually, our subcommittee was actually briefed last week, I believe. Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong. In the current fiscal year, $87 million of state money does go to the local libraries. However, if the local governments want to spend above and beyond that, that has to come out of local tax dollars. That has to come out of their local budget. And this is an exception to that, because there's no other line item in the state budget that's going to fund any other library in the state of Maryland. So this is an anomaly. This is something that we do special for this particular library. And that's the point that I wanted to make. I didn't want to send any wrong information out there and say that no state money goes to fund the operating budgets of any of the libraries. And I may have said that. I do apologize, but that's not the case. $87 million in the current fiscal year with state money goes to into the operating. Then we have a separate amount of money that goes to the capital budget for each of our libraries too, and that's based on, I guess, the merits of the projects. But yeah.
Thank you, Delegate Grice. Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for this panel? Seeing none, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 436. Next, we will move to House Bill 246, sponsored by Delegate Terry Hill. It's higher education return Peace Corps volunteers in-state tuition. Delegate Hill, thank you so much for being here, and please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the Appropriations Committee. I am here today to present House Bill 246, which is really a feel-good bill because you get to do something that's good and not cost us any money. Oh, yeah. So basically, what 246 does is it allows people who have volunteered for the Peace Corps, which you probably know generally requires a 2-year commitment to be overseas, to resume their in-state tuition status when they return to Maryland if they want to pursue higher education. Many of the Peace Corps jobs do not require post-secondary education, so after spending their time overseas, folks would like to come back and go to college. And for those who participate in the Peace Corps after college, it is not uncommon for them to want to come back and participate in graduate studies. But because of this little quirk, when they come back, they've been out of state, even though they haven't been living and residing in another state. They've been out for a couple of years, and so they are not considered to be in state. And I became aware of this from one of my constituents, Emily mentioned, who will be testifying here today, was sent back because of COVID. And she applied to graduate school and applied for a delegate scholarship. And I was told that she didn't qualify for a delegate scholarship because she was not in-state constituent, and we were able to get around that, but it just seems strange. And if you look at the fiscal note, you'll note that they point out that we actually offer all types of exceptions. Under current law, it says there are in-state tuition exemptions or waivers for public school teachers in certain cases, for military personnel and their spouses and dependents in certain circumstances, state and local public safety personnel and their families, AmeriCorps volunteers, and certain undocumented immigrants. But yet the Peace Corps is kind of left out. And so this bill would fix that. I see no opposition in your file. We do have supporting letters from MACC with an amendment that I would certainly favor taking up as a clarifying amendment, and would be, willing to either have the subcommittee or the committee offered. I'd be happy to have it drawn up myself and submit it for you. There's support from the Shriver Center at UMBC, background information from the Hunt Institute. And again, the fiscal note is just one that I just imagine the Appropriations Committee wanting to walk away from good stuff with a fiscal note like this. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll allow the others to speak or answer questions as you prefer.
Thank you very much, Delegate Hill. We really appreciate the presentation of your bill. And what we'll do is we have several witnesses here who are providing favorable testimony, both written and oral. So we'll hear from them, and then we'll take questions from members of the committee. We have Ms. Emily Manginis, if she's here. If she could provide a testimony within 2 minutes, please.
Yes. Hi. My name is Emily McGinnis. I'm currently an MPP candidate for the University of Maryland School for Public Policy. I formerly was a Peace Corps volunteer in Thailand, where I taught grades 4 through 9, and I'm testifying in support of House Bill 246. In March of 2020, I was evacuated to my home in Maryland due to the pandemic. Upon my unexpected return, I applied and was accepted to the University of Maryland Public Policy program. While reviewing my student information on my portal, I noticed I was identified as an out-of-state student. After inquiring if this was a mistake, the university responded by saying that because I had lived out of state for over 1 year, I was no longer considered an in-state student. I was given the opportunity to appeal this decision to the reclassification evaluator, but because I have never changed my permanent address from my childhood home in Ellicott City, where I have lived for 25 years, I could not provide a deed with my name to verify residency and was again denied. My out-of-state status made me ineligible for various state scholarships and grants. Fortunately, I received funding from Delegate Hill and her staff because she was willing to categorize me as a special circumstance. However, I know those who do not think to contact their state delegates have that same fortune. I feel strongly that Peace Corps volunteers whose main objective is to promote a better understanding of American culture and people overseas deserve to be exempt from this interpretation of residency. It was an honor to serve, and now to be ineligible to receive state aid because of my service feels unjust. While I was able to assemble alternative funding in order to afford my tuition, other returned Peace Corps volunteers do not have that luxury and depend on their in-state status to receive their education. I strongly urge this committee to vote in favor of House Bill 246 for the sake of all Maryland RPCVs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McGinnis, for your testimony and for your service. We really appreciate it. We also have Joby Taylor from UMBC, if Joby Taylor's here to provide testimony.
We have not seen Joby Taylor enter the waiting room.
Great, thank you very much. We do have written testimony by Joby Taylor too, but at this time we'll take questions from members of the Appropriations Committee. Delegate Jad Lewis is recognized.
Sure. First, Delegate Hill, great bill. This question is actually for Emily, coming back from the Peace Corps, a graduate of the School of Public Policy. So this is closer to isn't that so? But how's the program going for you?
How's the program doing?
How's it going for you?
Oh, it's really wonderful. I plan to specialize in international security, so it's my second semester, but it's going well so far. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad Delegate Hill could help you out.
Yes, me as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for House Bill 246? Delegate Krim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Hill, for the bill. I guess we do love bills here that have no fiscal note. So I think, though, that when you offer these opportunities to these talented individuals, they more than likely will stay here in Maryland and give us the benefit of their talent. Do you feel the same way about that?
Absolutely. I think these people, this cohort, are outstanding folks, and they're exactly the kind of people that we want to retain their Maryland residency, and we don't want to penalize them because they take the time out of their educational path to do some good in the world and to represent American values around the world and bring back a better understanding of what the rest of the world is like. So absolutely, Delegate.
Thank you very much, Delegate Krim. Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for House Bill 246?
And Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? In terms
Sure.
of your procedures, would it be better for me to offer the amendment of MACC, or will your committee take that amendment up?
If I may defer to the chairwoman. We'll follow up with you on that.
You can, Delegate Hill, thank you, by the way, for this bill. Sorry I missed the early part of it, but if you would draw the amendment up, offer it to us, we'll make sure it's incorporated.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your attention this afternoon.
Yeah, and thank you, Emily, for being in front of us. Appreciate it. I'll turn it back to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Delegate, for being here, and Ms. McGinnis. Everybody have a great day. Next, we'll move to House Bill 514, which is sponsored by our very own Delegate Ben Barnes, Maryland Legal Services Corporation funding abandoned property. Delegate Barnes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know we're all aware and frankly proud of one of the founding tenets of our civil democracy, that is, anyone charged with a criminal offense gets representation. But what I think our founders couldn't have envisioned is the expansion of our civil process in adjudicating the rights and benefits of our citizens. And, you know, anything from domestic violence, DV orders, to housing, evictions, the system is really responsible for so many of the rights, benefits, and just livability for our citizens. And this state has recognized that. We have funneled money into Maryland Legal Services, which provides representation for folks who can't afford representation through the years. But what's happened is that as that civil process has expanded and grown, their budget has become stretched. That's been exacerbated by this pandemic, where a lot of the money they rely on, such as IOLTA, has been shrunk because of the diminishment of those funds. And so this bill is simple. It's an extension. It takes an existing funnel from our abandoned property division of 2 million and grows it to 8 million. I will note that although that sounds like a large increase, it's really not when you consider when the program started, only 2 million represented about 7% of the abandoned property money. Whereas even if we do this increase, I'm sorry, 17%, whereas even if we do this increase, it only represents 7%. So we're really only keeping up with inflation by half if we pass this bill. So I think this is some of the greatest work being done in our state by folks who are dedicated to representing our citizens who need to access our civil courts but are unable to. I think it's a great place to get the money from, the abandoned property division. And so with that, we have a great panel here. We have Susan Ehrlichman, Natalie McSherry, Robin Murphy, Susan Francis. I'll defer to the experts to tell you about the great work they're doing. I appreciate your time, committee and Mr. Chairman, and I can defer to them for questions or take questions now or later, your choice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Delegate Barnes, for presenting the bill. Committee, if we may, we'll hear from the panelists and then we'll take questions at the end. All the panelists are providing both oral, most of what there's oral and written testimony, but we'll hear from each of them. First, providing both oral and written testimony is Susan Elchman with the Maryland Legal Services Corporation. And to all the witnesses, there's a 2-minute limit, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Susan Ehrlichman. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Legal Services Corporation. I very much want to thank Delegate Ben Barnes for sponsoring this important bill. A little bit of background: MLSC was created by the Maryland General Assembly in 1982 to ensure that low-income Marylanders had access to civil legal aid. MLSC grantees currently fund 36 organizations throughout the state. Last year, those programs served over 182,000 clients who needed help with evictions, foreclosures, child custody, protection from domestic violence, assistance getting their unemployment insurance, food stamps, a variety of matters that impact the quality of life and basic human needs. And all of these problems have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly low-income communities and communities of color. The reason we're here today is because of the disparate impact COVID-19 has had on the tremendous increase in needs of people facing evictions and domestic violence and needing food stamps, contrasted with the decrease in funding for those services. Maryland Legal Services Corporation has 3 funding sources, one being the Abandoned Property Fund, currently $2 million. Our 2 other major sources of funding is, as Delegate Barnes mentioned, IOLTA, that's strictly interest income. As the interest rates fell to 0, we lost 70% of that income since the pandemic. Likewise, our other major source of funding is from filing fee surcharges. As courts closed and filings decreased, that revenue also plummeted. We had to cut grants last year to these programs by 9%, which actually would have been much worse if we weren't rescued by our governor and our attorney general, who found emergency funding for us, but that was only for this current fiscal year. Enactment of HB 514 is critical for the health and well-being of Marylanders in every jurisdiction in our state. Without this funding, we will have to, again, significantly cut grants at a time when the need is skyrocketing. Also, increasing this revenue stream by $6 million will provide desperately needed stable funding, unlike our other 2 funding sources, which are always variable. In closing, I'd just like to say that we have studies that show that not only is funding civil legal aid the right thing to do and the important thing to do, it's the fiscally responsible thing to do. For every dollar spent on civil legal aid, there's a $6 return on investment. And that literally translates into hundreds of million dollars each year. I urge you to give a favorable report to House Bill 514. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this important measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ehrlichman. Next, we'll hear testimony from Ms. Natalie McSherry with the Maryland Legal Service Corporations and Maryland State Bar Association.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with the committee this afternoon. As you mentioned, I'm wearing two hats today. I am the current chair of the Maryland Legal Services Corporation and the president-elect of the Maryland State Bar Association. The Maryland State Bar Association takes very seriously its advocacy for legal services, so it's very easy for me to speak on behalf of both entities. You've already heard from Ms. Ehrlichman about the funding challenges for legal services. I want to talk for just a second about the importance, especially in our current legal climate, for confidence in the rule of law. As you probably all know, theoretically, the courts are accessible to everyone, but without a navigator, and sometimes, frankly, even a translator, people cannot make their way through the court system and the legal system. Having a qualified voice adds to that access, and it makes it so that those who have representation not only feel like they are being heard, but in fact ensures that they are heard. And when they are heard, they are more likely to stay in their homes. They are more likely to be safer from domestic violence. They are more likely to be able to access their rightful benefits and avoid their unlawful debts. In other words, they're likely to be more able to contribute fully to society. Now, without the stable funding that Susan Ehrlichman has just spoken about, Maryland Legal Services Corporation won't be able to make those navigators, translators possible and available to 80% of Maryland's population, which cannot afford to hire a lawyer. This is the only stable source of funding. While the funding and the need have been exacerbated by the pandemic, frankly, when the pandemic ends, the need doesn't go away and the funding won't become that much more stable unless we can be assured of increased funds from the Abandoned Property Fund. So I would ask the committee's support for House Bill 514 and appreciate and thank you for letting me appear here today to speak on its behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McSherry, for being here. Next, we'll hear testimony from Ms. Robin Murphy with the Disability Rights Maryland.
Technical difficulties, I'm here. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to support HB 514. I am Robin Murphy and I'm the Executive Director of Disability Rights Maryland. We are a nonprofit legal services organization in Maryland that provides free legal services to people with disabilities of any age and of any disability. For over 40 years, we have been helping Marylanders with disabilities access basic needs such as housing, special education, mental health, healthcare, transportation, employment, and preventing abuse and neglect and discrimination. I am here today because Maryland Legal Services Corporation is our single largest funder and supply a third of our entire funding. Reduction or elimination of funding from MLSC will have a devastating impact on our ability to serve Marylanders with disabilities. Since the pandemic hit, the need for our services has increased exponentially. I can just in this 2 minutes give you some snapshots of what our staff have done as they have continued to work remotely, even harder throughout this time. We began hosting Facebook Live Wednesday nights to answer parents' questions about students' special education's rights and protections during virtual learning. We've held some of these sessions in Spanish, and some of our videos have garnered over 1,500 views. We also provide individual representation to students with disabilities who need in-person special education services during this time. Students like 11-year-old Miguel, who's referenced in my written testimony, who went months without getting any education services until we intervened. We are also a member of the Developmental Disabilities Coalition and work closely with them on behalf of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. We have been successful in having the state issue new guidance so that disability support personnel can accompany the person they support when they go to healthcare facilities. And we have had Maryland's vaccine plan prioritize certain people with disabilities and their direct support professionals. Our staff could also continue our mandate, as we have always done, to monitor residential treatment centers, psychiatric hospitals, nursing homes, group homes, and prisons to prevent and respond to abuse and neglect. I could go on with the vital work our staff do each and every day, but I know you won't let me. Your support for this bill is essential for Disability Rights Maryland and the 35 other organizations that MLSC supports. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Murphy, for being here. Next, we will hear from Ms. Susan Francis, who is with Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chang and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Susan Francis. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service. We are the largest and oldest pro bono provider of civil legal services in Maryland. Our work every day is focused on how do we ensure that all Marylanders, regardless of income, have access to legal representation in the most important fundamental civil legal issues, the issues that you and I will face probably sometime in our lifetime as well. A divorce or custody, guardianship when an older parent loses capacity, an estate matter when someone dies, or God forbid, a foreclosure or bankruptcy when someone loses a job or has a medical crisis. The distinction for our clients is they have to face those challenges on their own. They don't receive legal representation without programs like ours that are standing there to help those navigate these very important life issues. The reality is, without an attorney, the outcomes are profoundly different and unfair for those that are unrepresented. What we do is critical to ensuring that funds stay within the most hardest hit communities. And when I say we, I mean all of our legal service providers, not just MBLS. One example is we work with legacy homeowners to ensure that they can stay in their homes and also to set them up so that they can transfer wealth to their next generation. That builds financial assets and resources in these communities that we know are hardest hit. The reality of investing as legal services is it's a good investment. A report recently came out from the Cleveland Legal Aid that said someone that has received civil legal services, over 50% actually, that receive civil legal services over a decade later, still have a stabilizing benefit because of that assistance that they were provided. As Robin has testified, this funding, the funding source through the Maryland Legal Services Corporation is critical to my program and all of the other programs. It is literally the linchpin that lets us do what we do every single day, how we do it. Without that support, we would not be able to provide. Last year, we helped over 4,500 Marylanders. We generated over 15,000 volunteer hours that was valued at $6 million for Marylanders that otherwise would go unrepresented. So I, like my colleagues, would request that you please pass a favorable report for House Bill 514. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Francis, for being here. Next, we will hear from Ms. Lisa Jordan, Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Ms. Jordan.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chang. It is lovely to see you here, although we miss you in public safety. Members of the Appropriations Committee, I'm Lisa Jordan. I'm the director at the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We are home to the Sexual Assault Legal Institute, where attorneys provide representation to survivors of sexual assault, both adults and children all over the state of Maryland. We are MLSC grantees, and we are here in strong support of House Bill 514. Thank you, Delegate Barnes, for presenting this important legislation. I know you've already heard some of the details about the financial situation and the pending crisis, and I agree with all of that. I know my colleagues are also going to talk about some of the specific work to survivors of domestic violence and illustrate that a little bit. I wanted to talk to you specifically about COVID and the effect of the pandemic on legal services. At the beginning of the pandemic, we started having 3 peer calls every week. So each week I had one call with all of the rape crisis centers across the state, another call with attorneys representing both victims of domestic violence and sexual assault from all over the state, and then advocates on Thursday mornings from all over the state. And it really gave us a sense of what's going on. Keep in mind that these are your constituents, that these are people from the Women's Law Center, from HopeWorks, from Hartley House, from the Life Crisis Center, from CASA of Washington County. So we really have a sense of what's going on. This fall, some of the calls are monthly, but we are still maintaining the calls, and they give us this real-time idea of how COVID's affecting survivors. And let me tell you, the staff have been amazing. They're absolutely been amazing. They have moved services online. They are helping legal services clients facing multiple challenges. Many of them have turned their homes into offices and into classrooms. Some have become sick. We had one whose family member died, and they really have persevered to make sure that people have access to justice. The pandemic also affects sexual assault survivors and perpetrators are emboldened by the pandemic. They are using the pandemic to gain and renew access to victims, to intimidate survivors into silence, and to interfere with survivors' attempts to seek safety and justice. On the other hand, sexual assault survivors are facing increasing economic instability, homelessness, job loss, mental health needs, amplified trauma, and isolation. And so the crisis is not only increasing the numbers of people asking us for legal services, but also the number of legal services and legal problems that they're presenting with. And just to give you one illustration, at the Sexual Assault Legal Institute, we helped 183 survivors in December of 2019. That 183 turned to 318 this past December. That's an increase of 135 more survivors, one December to the next. And that's the difference that COVID is making. And again, it's more issues also. So before we might have helped with a protective order, but now we're also helping with evictions, unemployment benefits, other issues. And then finally, everything takes longer. You know that. Every hearing takes longer, every request for services takes longer, every attempt to help a survivor. Last year, just the domestic violence sexual assault community provided legal services to over 7,500 survivors. That's just a small part of the MLSC community. You have CASA's written testimony, and you've got heart-wrenching stories that will illustrate the sorts of things that we do for sexual assault survivors. And I think that one of the things that's critical to realize is that House Bill 514, this is not an increase. This is not going to meet the need. That is just the very basic minimum that we need to stay afloat, to keep legal services available. And so for those reasons, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 514. I want to appreciate Delegate Kittleman's assistant and say that my assistant also supports the bill. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan, for being here today. Next, we will hear from Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Washington.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chang and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Kelly Thompson. I'm a supervising attorney for Catholic Charities Legal Network, which is a program of Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Washington. As my predecessor said this afternoon, we seek favorable review of this bill 514, and so I will be brief. I think it's important to know my agency is one of the largest and most comprehensive social services providers in the DC area, and that includes Montgomery, Prince George's, Charles, Calvert, and St. Mary's counties in Maryland. Our doors are open to anyone in need, regardless of background, belief, or circumstance. And 2 of our programs, the Legal Network and Immigration Legal Services, provide life-changing legal services to low-income Marylanders, and both have done so for over 30 years each. So So as an established legal services provider in Maryland, Catholic Charities understands the importance that pro bono legal services make in the lives of low-income Marylanders. And we've seen the increased need firsthand since the beginning of the pandemic. MLSC provides critical funding to 36 legal services agencies throughout the state, and our collective ability to serve our clients means the difference between housing or homelessness, a job or joblessness, and chaos or stability and safety in a child's life. And so for those reasons, we ask for a favorable report on House Bill 514. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Thompson. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for Delegate Ben Barnes or the panelists? The gentlelady from Howard County is recognized, Delegate Kittleman. Delegate Kittleman.
Yes, I'm sorry. It just occurred to me while I was listening to the testimony, two questions. One, how do you determine which cases to take or which plaintiffs or whatever to do? And the other question is, do you support both plaintiffs and defendants? And if so, what happens? Are you ever on both sides of an issue? Just how it works.
So I can take part of this. So I'm, again, Susan Francis, the Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service, because we're probably one of the few programs that actually has exactly the circumstance that you've just described. I will say in terms of our programs and most legal services programs, our primary guidelines are from the Maryland Legal Services Corporation, which is 50% of Maryland median income. But it depends on the kind of case type, whether we take a plaintiff or defendant matter. So for example, in a debt collection case, we're not really going to represent, Capital One. We're going to represent the individual in which is the debtor in that case. But because we're a pro bono program, we do sometimes, particularly in our family law matters, where we have two low-income individuals who are getting divorced or have a custody proceeding, we actually do, we have to worry about, I think most programs have to worry about conflicts, but because we place them out with pro bono attorneys, we do actually have cases where we're assisting on both sides with that.
Thank you.
The gentlelady from Frederick County is recognized, Delegate Carol Crim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I have constituents who would want to participate in this service, how do they go about making those contacts?
Well, sure, I'm happy. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer that. Well, as mentioned earlier, MLSC, we fund 36 organizations throughout the state of Maryland. The Maryland Legal Aid is the largest. They have offices and are a staffed program that serve low-income people. As Susan mentioned, 50% of Maryland median income is the statutory requirement for service. They would, and as Susan also mentioned, the Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service is the statewide pro bono program. But there's also other local domestic violence programs, housing programs, and others throughout the state of Maryland. These programs do a significant amount of outreach. So we would expect that many people would know where to find service. We also, there is a very robust campaign from the self-help centers, which has a centralized intake system or a centralized phone bank, if you will, and they make the appropriate referrals to all of the programs who are funded by MLSC and others as well.
And if I could just add, MLSC has all of the grantees listed on their website. So with all of our contact information, so where we do our work, the kind of work that we do, and the People's Law Library also has a list of legal services directory as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, may I just also say that all of the rape crisis centers, all of the domestic violence programs provide referrals to the legal services. The Sexual Assault Legal Institute and the domestic violence programs are listed in the information that prosecutors have to give to victims of crime and that police have to give to victims of crime. We have a PSA in both English and Spanish that's been running now, talking about calling to have help. And then we also do a great deal of kind of direct community-based outreach, talking to people who are working with culturally specific programs. So at the moment, we have an outreach initiative with a program working with the Korean community in Montgomery County. So we do that all over this state. So there's a robust system of outreach. And then of course, we let all of you all know about our services generally each year as well. So please do know that we are here during the pandemic for your constituents.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan. Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none.
If I may, I
Sure.
just want to respond to Delegate Kittleman's question about the defendants on the other side. I would have to say for Disability Rights Maryland, to the extent we bring lawsuits, but most of our advocacy is policy. They are organizations and institutions, so they are already represented by counsel. So the person is not, it is our client who does not have the representation. So I just wanted to point that out at school systems, hospitals, other institutions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Are there any other questions from members of the committee for this bill, House Bill 514? Seeing none, that ends the bill hearing for House Bill 514. Thank you everyone for being here. Next, we have House Bill 184, which is sponsored by Delegate Ivey. It is for the University of System of Maryland, Morgan State University, and St. Mary's College of Maryland board membership alterations. Delegate Ivey, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the entire committee. Colleagues, for the record, Delegate Julian Ivey here presenting House Bill 184. House Bill 184 expands the required membership of the Board of Regents for the USM, University System of Maryland, and Morgan State University, and also the Board of Trustees of St. Mary's College of Maryland. Each board would add 2 individuals with a background in labor union organizing, 1 individual with a background in immigration advocacy, 1 individual with a background in civil rights advocacy as well. Additionally, the USM Board of Regents must add 3 more individuals, 1 who attended Bowie State University, 1 who attended Coppin State University, and 1 who attended the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. As introduced, House Bill 184 makes necessary changes to the requirements and qualifications for each of these important boards to play a critical role in stewarding our state's higher education future, including individuals from different professional backgrounds on these boards, such as labor union organizing, immigration and civil rights advocacy, ensures that an equitable balance between the backgrounds already represented at the table. Including individuals from a labor background gives a voice to all of the non-faculty members that keep our universities running. Adding individuals with immigration advocacy experience will ensure that our state's universities have the best interests of our undocumented and international students at heart. Expanding these boards to include individuals will protect and promote civil liberties and civil rights on all state university campuses. Lastly, I believe it's extremely important that the USM Board of Regents add the 3 members from the system's respective HBCUs. Our HBCUs have been and will remain critical in effectively providing quality higher education to our state's Black and other minority populations. With that, I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 184.
Thank you, Delegate Ivey, for the presentation of House Bill 184. It looks like there's written testimony that was submitted, both unfavorable from the St. Mary's College of Maryland, also the University System of Maryland. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the bill's sponsor? Seeing none, thank you very much, Delegate Ivey, for being here.
Thank you.
House Bill 184's hearing. Next, we will move on to House Bill 894. Our very own Appropriations Committee member, Delegate Haynes, is the bill sponsor. It's Education Community Colleges Collective Bargaining. Delegate Haynes, thank you very much for presenting this bill, and please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair and Madam Chair, and illustrious members of the Appropriations Committee. Again, good afternoon. As the Vice Chair mentioned, I'm Delegate Keith E. Haynes, for the record, sponsor of House Bill 894, Community Colleges Collective Bargaining legislation. Let me just at the outset say that that this bill, let me just highlight what it does and what it does not do. what the bill does basically is to establish a collective bargaining process for local community colleges employees. As the bill is written, it covers the following classifications: full-time faculty, part-time faculty, and staff as far as units for collective bargaining. It does not, or it should, or it excludes officers, supervisory or confidential employees, and student assistants. And so let me just sort of put this, some parentheses around House Bill 894. In its very, very simplistic form, this bill really is one thing. It provides enabling legislation. I just want to be very clear that there's no misunderstandings or no misassumptions about what the bill does. It is enabling legislation. It does not mandate the formation of collective bargaining. It does not automatically or instantaneously create collective bargaining. What it does is enable a process for those employees at our community colleges, if they choose to test the waters as to whether or not they want to form a union for collective bargaining, this is the process by which they would have to follow. Let me also say that collective bargaining, as we all know, it's very essential to providing equity and also a voice for our public employees. It's not just me who says that, it's just not the supporters of this legislation, but it also is shares very important political figures share those same sentiments. And if I can, I just want to show you a good quote that was tweeted a little less than 2 weeks ago. I'm going to try to share my screen if I may here. This is from President Biden. Every American deserves the dignity and respect that comes with the right to union organize and collectively bargain. The policy of our government is to encourage union organizing, and employers should ensure their workers have a free and fair choice to join a union. If I can try to get this, hold on one second. There we go. And I also want to share something with you, if I may here. Just want to get it teed up. There are many, many, many voices and individuals who are adjunct professors, who are employees, as far as faculty, staff, who are directly impacted by the lack of collective bargaining. It affects their ability as far as planning. It also affects the ability of the community colleges in forecasting costs and also just providing some basic rights as far as staff and instructors are concerned in preparation for their semester of teaching. No one can say it better than the voices of the people who are impacted by the failure to have collective bargaining. And so if I may, I just want to play a short video so that you can hear our virtual panel and the voices who are impacted by this legislation.
Delegate Haynes, I think
Yeah.
I think we're having trouble hearing the video, the sound. We see the video.
Let me try this one more time, Mr. Chairman. I think we have a little technical problem here. Is that better? Can you all hear that? Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
No.
Did you happen
Are you able to hear
turn
it?
the captions on, Delegate?
No, we're not hearing this. My suggestion is that we
Okay,
we send this video to members, okay?
sure. We can do that, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. I'll make sure that all members have a copy sent to them, and we can pick up. You can look at it in your free time. I'm sorry for the technical problem there. However, what I do want to say is that the video actually highlights the voices of the individuals who are impacted by the legislation. As you know, we are working virtually and everyone cannot participate, but this is a great video in their own voices of why this is needed. Let me simply say that, let me just share a couple of facts about collective bargaining rights as it relates to our community colleges. This committee, under the leadership of our current chair, and I also sponsored this legislation a few years ago, where we actually passed a form or a version of this bill out of the Committee of Appropriations, and it also passed the House and was sent over to the Senate. So this is not a new issue. However, there are some differences with the legislation as it relates to some recent changes. And I'm gonna actually just let one of the panelists or one of the individuals who have signed up to testify, Mr. Terry Kavanaugh, actually sort of go in detail of what those differences are. There are only three major differences that exist between what we passed previously and what the bill does currently. But let me just sort of put this in perspective. We all know that collective bargaining rights are not, is no stranger to the state of Maryland. In Maryland, collective bargaining rights are guaranteed to over 100,000 faculty and staff at our K through 12 public school systems. 60,000 state workers have collective bargaining rights. As it relates to our community colleges, there are 4 community colleges in the state of Maryland that do have some form of collective bargaining rights. What our faculty and our staff and our employees at our community college level is just really asking for the basic right to have or to choose to collectively bargain on a statewide level if they should do so, if they choose to do so. What I would like to do is just highlight that this bill has the support of several organizations, a statewide correlation supported by SEIU Local 500, ASME Maryland Council 67, Maryland State Education Association, UFCW Local 1994, Maryland Center on Economic Policy, LEUNA, Baltimore Washington Laborers District Council, CASA, Strong Future Maryland, UFCW Local 400, Progressive Maryland, New Faculty, and Jews for Justice, and also support on the from the local jurisdictions. I'm not going to belabor the point because we've had this bill in a previous version. I would ask for a favor on House Bill 894 and simply say, let's get this done in 2021. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the Appropriations Committee.
Great. Thank you very much, Delegate Haynes, for the presentation of the bill. What we'll do is we have several members who are going to be providing favorable testimony, and then we'll hear that, and then we'll take questions from members of the committee. First, we have favorable, both written and oral testimony, is Terry Kavanaugh with SEIU Maryland and DC State Council. Terry, if you're here. If you could...
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the committee.
And it's just as a reminder, Terry, sorry, excuse me, just a reminder to all the panelists that there's a 2-minute time limit. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak today about this important legislation. Wanted to thank Delegate Haynes for introducing the bill. I'll try not to repeat some of his testimony. I'm Terry Kavanaugh of SEIU, here representing SEIU Local 500 and speaking in favor of House Bill 894, expanding the right of collective bargaining community colleges in Maryland. You have my written testimony. As Delegate Haynes said, the bill may look familiar. It's been introduced in the past. It's been passed by the committee and by the full House. And to repeat what he said, it provides the structure and process for staff and faculty at community colleges, if they so desire, to select an exclusive bargaining representative to sit down across the table from their employer and negotiate over wages, salaries, benefits, and other conditions of employment. It is a right currently exercised by over 200,000 public employees in Maryland and enjoyed by almost all workers in the private sector, including colleges and universities. Community college staff and faculty in 24 states across the country have the same right, including Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Washington, D.C., California, and many others. Since there's been some other understanding or misinformation about the bill in the past, let me restate and maybe repeat what Delegate Haynes had said. It will not require any group of workers or individuals to be automatically in a union. There are no agency fees, no strikes allowed, no required tuition increases, no bankrupting or closures of colleges, no elimination of existing bargaining representatives. We did make some changes. We added language taken from Maryland legislation passed recently that replaces fair share fees, which were outlawed by the Janus decision by the U.S. Supreme Court a few years ago. We replaced that with requirements to provide information and access to the exclusive representative if one is chosen. We also added language that in fiscal year 2022, colleges would not be required to negotiate over salary increases due to recognition of the potential precarious financial situations colleges might find themselves in. Whether staff and faculty choose to organize or not, we believe, and we trust that you will agree, or we believe and trust that you will agree that they deserve the right to make that choice. So we request a favorable report on House Bill 894. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Kavanaugh. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Pia Morrison, SEIU Local 500. Ms. Morrison, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Members of the committee, my name is Pia Morrison, president of SEIU Local 500, which is made up of over 20,000 working people in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. Our union represents the support staff of Montgomery County Public Schools, family child care providers, adjunct faculty at several Maryland colleges and universities, staff at nonprofits, and working people across the region. Many of our members are on the front lines of public education in Maryland, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. That is why today we submit this testimony in favor of House Bill 894. House Bill 894, known as the Maryland Community College Employees Freedom to Collectively Bargain Act of 2021, would grant to employees at our state's community college the equal right to collectively bargain. Currently, 200,000 public sector workers in Maryland have the right to collectively bargain, including staff and instructors at K through 12 schools, as well as professors and staff at colleges and universities. That employees at community colleges would be excluded from collective bargaining is an oddity and an injustice. Employees at Montgomery College have been unionized for 10 years. In that time, they've had their needs met at work without raising the cost of student attendance. In fact, several other Maryland community colleges have exceeded Montgomery College in their cost of attendance within this time, and Montgomery College attendees enjoyed the slowest tuition rate growth in the state for several consecutive years. Across Maryland's public sector and within its community colleges, collective bargaining yields positive outcomes for employees. It leads to compromises between employers and employees and can help institutions' relationships with its employees run far more smoothly. House Bill 894 is essential for Maryland community college employees who need a voice on the campus during COVID, during this post-pandemic recovery, and beyond. We therefore ask for you to support House Bill 894 and strongly urge a favorable committee report. Thank you so much for all that you do and your dedication to fairness and justice to the working people of our state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Morrison, for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Doug Prouty with the Maryland State Education Association, providing just oral testimony.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair McIntosh, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm Doug Prouty. I'm a high school English teacher. I'm serving as the Vice President of the Maryland State Education Association. We represent over 75,000 educators in Maryland public schools who prepare our students for college, careers, and citizenship. I want to thank Delegate Haynes for sponsoring this bill and for his commitment to the workers and the labor movement in the state of Maryland. MSEA strongly supports House Bill 894, which would establish a collective bargaining process for local community college employees, including full-time and part-time staff. This bill is one of our priorities for the 2021 session. We supported it since 2014 in different forms, and we want this to be the year that it gets done. Community college employees have waited long enough. This bill would grant the same rights as all K-12 public school employees currently have in the state of Maryland. MSEA believes community colleges are key in improving educational outcomes for students. The collective voice of community college employees will help improve the experience of thousands of community college students. Community colleges will play a vital role as we come out of the pandemic. Community college employees have earned a say in the health, safety, and working conditions, as well as salaries and benefits. In particular, having employees have a say in the health and safety as we reopen schools will make a huge difference for community colleges, just as it has for public schools. This bill also will help us attract the best possible candidates to community colleges around the state of Maryland, and it'll make their jobs a career. Currently, too many community college instructors have to do gig employment and don't actually have a career option. But this will help that to be a reality. So we urge a favorable report on House Bill 894. I want to thank you very much for your time and attention today, and for your hard work on behalf of the workers of the state of Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prouty. Next, we'll hear favorable testimony from Glenn Middleton with ASME Council 67, who is also providing written testimony. Mr. Middleton.
Yeah, good afternoon, Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee. And also good afternoon. I saw the chair, Maggie McIntosh. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak today. And we want to thank you, Vice Chair of this committee, but also I want to thank the members of this committee, the state delegates of the Appropriation Committee. I am Glenn Middleton, the Executive Director of ASME Maryland Council 67, representing about 13,500 public employees, including those essential employees at the community college in Baltimore County, the community college in Prince George's County, and the community college in Montgomery County. I come before you today to testify in support of House Bill 894, which authorizes employees at all of Maryland's community colleges the opportunity to collectively bargain and be represented. We believe this bill strikes a proper balance between employees' rights to organize while ensuring that everyone in the bargaining unit has a vote on determining whether to participate or not. Also, by granting all employees collective bargaining rights at Maryland community colleges, you're providing, which is important, these hardworking employees an opportunity to partner in enriching their workplace environment. During this pandemic, our members at community colleges stood ready to service and help to make our colleges safer, having the ability to give input on how to make the colleges and themselves safe from COVID-19. They have been working in their workplace on safety committees. Those committees were created through collective bargaining. There are many other examples across the country of how collective bargaining has strengthened the workplace for employees. One union representing sanitation workers saved the city of Chicago $7 million by identifying more efficient truck routes. In California and in New York, unionized healthcare workers in the two largest municipal healthcare systems in the country work with employees to institute quality and efficiency improvements that resulted in increased patient satisfaction and also shorter and wait times for lower asthma readmission and rates among children and
Mr.
improve.
Middleton, if you could summarize.
And as I summarize, we just think it's really important and we want you to vote a favorable vote in support of House Bill 894. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Middleton. Appreciate it. Next, we'll hear from Joan Bevilacqua.
Yes, hello. Members of the Appropriations Committee, hello. I'm Joan Bevilacqua, and I'm an adjunct professor at Howard Community College and Prince George's Community College, and I am in support of Bill HB 894. I deserve the right to decide for myself whether I want to be represented by a union. This is a fundamental right that over 200,000 other public sector workers enjoy, and community college employees should not be denied this basic right. COVID-19 has made my teaching more difficult. Last March, we went home to redesign our courses to go online. I've spent hours in training with no compensation. I have spent my own money purchasing equipment needed to continue to present my classes, and countless hours reworking my courses so my students can continue to learn during this pandemic. Without collective bargaining, we have no say on the terms and conditions of our contracts or our working conditions. Without collective bargaining, we've been left to the arbitrary whims of the college administrations. With collective bargaining, we can negotiate commitments to future compensation enhancements, ensure job security and annual appointments, create professional development funds, joint labor management committees, rank advancement, creation of a regular part-time position, etc. Our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. If you have spoken with one passionate professor, you've spoken to us all. We understand and care how important we are to the future of our country. We need you to care back. Because we do not have a seat at the table with no rights, the administration knows they have no obligation to make any changes. This is the year to make this change. I ask you to vote yes on HB 894 and strongly urge a favorable committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bevilacqua. Appreciate your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Stephen Torres, who's providing both oral and written testimony. Mr. Torres.
Thank you. Members of the Appropriations Committee, my name is Stephen Torres, and I'm an adjunct instructor at Howard Community College. I'm here to voice my support for HB 894. This bill would grant community college employees the right to be represented by a union and collectively bargain with their respective campus administrations. This is a right enjoyed by over 200,000 other public sector employees in the state of Maryland, and yet community college employees have been left behind and denied this basic right. This inequality is unjust and undervalues the lives and contributions of these essential workers. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Many community college instructors like myself were called upon by their respective schools to retrain to become online instructors. We did this to protect the health and safety of our students, faculty, and support staff from the deadly coronavirus. With community colleges predicted to play an important role in our recovery, it's more important now that we acknowledge how essential community college employees will be in training and retraining thousands of Marylanders. We seek the ability to bargain for better working conditions, such as greater job security. Adjunct instructors are hired on a per semester basis and are often not notified of course cancellations until less than a week before the beginning of a new term, long after it would be reasonable to find employment at another institution. This makes the emotional and financial stability of being an adjunct difficult and means the attention of the instructor must partly be toward preparing to find new work when they should be focused on the academic success of their students. As my colleague said, our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. We have fought for years to gain this right. This is the year we pass this bill. Let's get Maryland back on the path to recovery by giving community colleges and their employees the tools for success and the respect they deserve. I ask you to vote yes on HB 894 and strongly urge a favorable committee report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Torres. And last of the favorable testimony, we have Christopher Meyer with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. Mr. Meyer?
We have not seen Christopher Meyer in the waiting room.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ms. Wareheim. Next, we'll move to, at this time, we'll take questions from members of the Appropriations Committee, and the gentleman from the Eastern Shore is recognized, Delegate Christ.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And anyone can answer this question. Is there any surveys that have been done with any of the employees at any of these colleges or all the colleges? Or is there any evidence that there is a significant demand for collective bargaining among the employees?
I'll take that, I guess. There hasn't been, that I know of, there hasn't been a statewide survey of all the people who work at the community colleges. I would lean on the video that you saw, and maybe you'll hear it when you get it, that there is a strong level of support at many of the schools. So generally, I can talk briefly about the overall surveys, is workers want to have a choice on whether they would select a union or not. Many who would not select a union, they want to have the choice on whether they can or not. They don't want to be restricted, saying you're not even allowed to make a choice. And I think that's backed up by national studies, whether it's public employees or workers in the private sector.
Mr. Vice Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So this bill is basically being brought by the unions then, more so than by the employees?
Well, unions are made up of workers, so we don't draw a distinction.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Sponsor the bill.
Yeah. Let me also just emphasize that there's no requirement that employees form a union. As I indicated earlier, if the desire is there, it doesn't really need to have a survey, but if the desire is there for employees to collectively bargain, what this legislation does is open the gate, so to speak, for them to exercise that right and decide whether they want to form a union to collectively bargain or not. It could very well be that they do not. But if they choose to do so, to do so, that door is now there for them to be able to exercise that right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, may I add
Mr. Torres, sure.
So I am an adjunct instructor at a community college. I was approached by a union organizer and was asked my interest in wanting to form a union on my campus. And in conversations that I had about that, I decided that that was a decision that I wanted to make as an instructor. And in trying to have conversations with others other colleagues on my campus, the sense that I have gotten is that there are a lot of community college instructors who are interested, but are afraid for their jobs to come out publicly in support of forming a union. And so it is up to the unions and their organizers to work with lawmakers and other advocates to propose this legislation, and any community college instructors who are brave enough to come out publicly in support of having this legislation passed, and then also form a union on their campuses.
May I say something? This is Joan Bevilacqua.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I actually, a number of adjuncts at Howard Community College 7 years ago were very upset about our working conditions, and we reached out to the union. The union didn't come looking for us. It is ground floor up. It is us going up to work with SEIU, not the SEIU knocking on our door. We knocked on their door. And I have been working on this bill for over 7 years. I am passionate about this. My voice is heard on campus. The administration knows me. And I believe with all my heart that most people agree that we should have the right to collectively bargain, including our administrators. They may never tell you that, but I believe it with my whole heart.
The Vice Chairman of the Economic and Education Subcommittee, Delegate Solomon's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Haynes, for bringing this bill back again. Appreciate all the folks from labor here. Ms. Marson, it's good to see you. I just wanted to follow up on one of the points that you made about our county's great community college, MC. Wanted to just ask for clarity. I mean, what's the budget situation like at MC? How has that school responded to COVID? Have we seen the sky fall?
No, we have not.
No, we have not. I mean, as a matter of fact, they were able to get the professional development that they needed. They've advocated for things that were important to students, like student loan debt relief. These are educators that are passionately committed to the work of supporting young people who they know may not have any other entryway into the middle class without community colleges. They're not doing this work to be rich. They're doing this work because they want to have a say so that it can enrich and enhance the education and instruction they're providing to Marylanders.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I've had some really great conversations over the past couple of weeks with MC, and they've really done amazing work, particularly on responding to COVID. So I appreciate you highlighting them, and we know they're the only community college in the state right now that has full collective bargaining rights. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Delegate Haynes, for bringing this bill back.
The gentleman representing Howard and Carroll County, Delegate Reed Novotny, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few quick questions, if I could, to the sponsors and the people here to support it. So it was just mentioned that there might be some retribution if you spoke about wanting to be in a union. So my first question is, has there been any cases in which someone was fired or penalized for wanting to be in a union that you know of personally?
If I can answer that question, I don't know that I have any experience of hearing someone specifically being fired for expressing interest in wanting to join a union, but I have heard anecdotal stories of teachers who have expressed interest and then not been asked to come back the next semester, or not been put on the schedule for classes the next semester. So not being outright told don't come back, but not being invited back in sort of a seemingly random circumstance.
Okay, I appreciate your perspective, and I totally understand. And the last question would be, it was made a comment that, I've done public service for a lot of my life too, and you don't do it to get rich, and I understand that. What exactly do we expect to get as a collective bargaining unit And where would the funds go to provide those things? Is it pay raises? Is it additional PPE in this case that we're in this COVID environment? What are you looking for?
I can answer that one, sir. Actually, if we do have collective bargaining, the adjuncts decide for themselves what, like maybe the 5 things that they want to bring to the administration as working on their contracts. And it's never, if there was an ask for additional pay and the money wasn't there, then that's off the table. So there are many other things that there will be asked for, like a year-long contract, for example, or the fact that, once you have a course, they're not going to take it away from you. So as Steve had mentioned, having a course removed from you 4 days before the class begins and you have no employment is extremely stressful. And it's stressful because we care about our students. We are professional instructors. This is what we've trained to do. This is who we are.
Thank you both.
As a reminder to the committee, we'll be hearing unfavorable testimony next. The gentlelady from Howard and Carroll County is recognized. Delegate Kittleman.
Thank you. I have 2 questions, but my first is, I have to express a good deal of confusion. There's always anecdotal evidence, and then there is data. Howard Community College, for a record 11th consecutive year, is named a great college to work for. This is a very extensive, largest, most well-respected workplace recognition programs in the country, and it's done based on a lot of different things, but signs receive top ratings from employees on their workplaces and practices. And Howard Community College is only one of 2 colleges nationwide to win that honor 11 years in a row. So
yeah, but our adjuncts surveyed in those questions.
Pardon?
Our adjuncts part of that survey.
Well, yeah, that's why I have difficulty conceiving all the issues. My second question really
It's an interesting survey. You should look into it a little bit more. It is a bit of like, who's the best doctor in town? Who's the best gallery in town? It's not exactly the best way to judge the employees' quality feeling of their workplace.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of surveys. This one is just so overwhelming. But anyway, my other question is, and I guess if there are people speaking the opposite side, they may cover this, but apparently, and I got this from reading some of the testimony, there's a CADE formula that says the state is supposed to fund community colleges. They're supposed to add 1/3 of their funding responsibility. That was started 29 years ago, and apparently the state hasn't done what it's supposed to do ever since then. And I ask that, you said if the money isn't there, you don't get it, but I guess that's a big question, because if the state is not funding community colleges as it had promised to do so, it makes it hard to allow unions that might negotiate for higher wages. So if you want to answer that, or
If I may, Mr.
Sponsor the bill is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For my good colleague from Howard and Carroll County, let me sort of provide some meat on the bones, so to speak, on your issue. The bill as written is a little different than the bill that we passed a few years ago. And I just want to reemphasize that we've had this bill before, and we've passed it out of this committee, and we've passed it out of the House and sent it over to the Senate. One of the differences that probably wasn't highlighted a little earlier in the way it could have is that when it comes to the issue of collectively bargaining, the issue of wages, this bill has a phase-in, meaning that that particular issue can't even come up until 2023 under this legislation. But when you hear the video that is going to be emailed to you very shortly before the end of the day, hopefully, you will hear from various workers from various community colleges where there are issues that are important to adjunct and part-time faculty and full-time faculty that has nothing to do with wages. It has to do with working conditions. I mean, for instance, I'll give you a great example. There was a discussion of how the adjuncts did not have a sufficient place. They didn't have offices. They had no place to really sort of prepare or meet their students before or after classes. Although they may have talked about it individually, nothing got done. But when they got the rights to collectively bargain, they were able to go into the administration and negotiate that. And now they have facilities to meet the needs of their students. It really is an inequity in some cases, level of instruction to the students. Because if a student can't properly meet their instructor, they're not getting the full benefit of that instructor's wisdom. So there are things that are that relates to working conditions that may not have anything to do with salaries at all. And I just want to emphasize that this bill as written this year is a phase-in on the ability to collectively bargain wages.
Well, thank you, Delegate Haynes. I appreciate the extra comment. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
And respectfully, Delegate Kittleman, in addition, adjunct professors also walk in lockstep with the colleges in advocating for the state of Maryland to live up to their responsibility as it relates to the CADE funding. As I stated before, they're educators. They're passionate about imparting knowledge to young people, and they want to walk in lockstep to be sure that as many young people as possible have access to a quality community college education.
And
Thank
I
you.
agree, we are not funding the community colleges as we should. And again, this year, which I find troubling.
The gentlelady from Frederick County is recognized. Delegate Krim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that yesterday, my county executive called me to tell me testimony and in support of this bill. So that's how she feels about collective bargaining. So, you know, we look at our correctional officers in the state, our first responders, our teachers, state police, all collective bargain, our state employees. So I just want to ask this question to the sponsor, and I just want to ask him, do I have it right? So what this bill does, it enables and empowers community college and staff to collectively bargain. This bill provides the framework for that, and everything is subject to funding. Is that a concise picture of this bill?
As we have reiterated, that you are exactly correct, Delegate Krim. It's very simplistic form. That is the essence of the bill. It's nothing more, nothing less.
The gentleman from Montgomery County is recognized. Delegate Acevedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following up on Delegate Krim's question, I have a couple more clarifying questions for the panel. I know my honorable colleague was talking about Howard Community College's stellar rankings. And I just have a couple of questions if folks on the panel can respond yes or no. But our community college employees, in this instance, Howard Community College employees, are they not in large part responsible for those stellar and national rankings?
That would absolutely make sense to me, Delegate Acevedo.
Okay. Now, does this, and just another clarifying question, does this bill force any worker, any community college worker into a union, yes or no?
It does not force any worker into a union. It gives them the option to choose whether or not they want to be in a union. It's enabling legislation.
Gotcha. That's what enabling legislation means. Thank you for the clarification. Now, does this bill allow workers then to, in other words, collectively bargain amongst themselves and their employers on things related to their employment, such as wages, benefits, everything that we would expect for workers in America today?
Absolutely.
Does. Okay. Thank you very much. Just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Delegate Alcivero. Are there any other questions for the favorable panel? Next, we will move to the unfavorable panel. We have two of them. And as a reminder to the panelists that we have a 2-minute time limit. First is Dr. Bernard Sadusky, who's providing both written and oral testimony. And he is with the Maryland Association of Community Colleges. Dr. Sadusky, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and Madam Chair, if you're still here. I can't see if you are still here. Make no mistake, I mean, this is about a fiscal impact on community colleges, whether it's immediate or whether it's delayed. I appreciate, we've had this conversation with SEIU people before, and I appreciate their understanding the predicament that community colleges are in. Beside the fact of 29 years of never meeting the promise of the CADE formula, the last 2 years have been devastating. And I've had that, and I've listed that in my testimony. So the question is, beside the fiscal impact, are there other issues with the bill? Well, before we move away from fiscal impact, if this bill is so good, then what we need is some type of guarantee that we can do good faith bargaining. And I know the delegate sponsors this bill is familiar with that term. And what the term means is that you go to the table and you try to come out with a contract that both parties are able to do that. Right now, fiscally, it's almost impossible. Quite frankly, we lost $36 million last year. We tend to lose another $26 million. Hopefully some of the people who are sponsoring this bill could help us with some of that. So the losses have been $140 million since 2008. It took us 8 years to get back to where we should be on the CADE formula. And we've been rebased again. So the solution is there's got to be some kind of consistent funding for this. So let's put it up to where these community colleges are. Community colleges are funded. The worst partner in the funding is the state, who wants to mandate this. However, we need to talk to county government. If they're willing to say, yeah, we support this concept, we understand what these people are all about, and there's going to be a fiscal impact. If we say there's not going to be a fiscal impact, we're deceiving everyone who is listening to this. There is a fiscal impact to implement and a fiscal impact to maintain. However, with some kind of guarantee and support for it, it may be doable. So we offer you that there should be some agreement by local government. And if the local county executive or county commissioners say, we approve of this, we've got it for K to 12, we're willing to support the concept, that puts us in a whole different ballgame. The second thing we want to say is the bill is a little bit different, and thank you very much. However, make it a manageable bill. We have, if you will, how we are different is when the state negotiates with AFSCME or SEIU or whomever they negotiate with, they do it for all the unions one time. This bill has got the potential of having 96 different units, negotiations going on at one time. I don't think that happens, but can you imagine the disruption on campus with the anxiety about we're going under negotiation and the possibilities, 96 units?
I mean, if you could summarize. We're at the time limit.
Oh, thank you for, yes, okay, yes, sir. And I would also say that there are other issues with this bill that need clarification. There are models, you've pointed to Montgomery County for SEIU in determining what an adjunct or a part-time faculty member is. I would say if you follow past practice on any high impact legislation, such as family leave, ban the box, then this should be no different. And you should have some type of study resolution committee before you progress with the bill. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Drew Jabin with the Maryland Association of Counties, providing both favorable written and oral testimony. Mr. Jabin.
Hi, Miss Jabin.
I'm sorry, Miss
It's
Jabin. Sorry about that.
It happens all the time. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Drew Jabin here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in opposition to House Bill 894. As always, you have my written testimony. I will be brief. You've already heard from Bernie, who made a ton of really great points. Collective bargaining, as outlined in this bill, could create potentially unsustainable costs for counties who provide substantial funding for community colleges throughout Maryland. The combination of a state-imposed system and costs, no county participation in bargaining, and no additional state funding is simply not affordable. Moreover, the bill will lead to increased tuition costs at a time when training and educational opportunities are most needed. Our opposition has nothing to do with the merits of collective bargaining. It's all about the costs. When community colleges see a bill that they believe will have a significant fiscal impact on operations, they come to us for help because they know that counties will need to provide them with additional funding to meet a new spending mandate, especially when the state share of the CADE formula falls short. MACO is here as a partner of the network of community colleges, and we request an unfavorable report on House Bill 894. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jabin. We'll take questions from members of the Appropriations Committee. Delegate Resnick is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. For Mr. Sandusky, I got two quick questions. The first one is, you said in your testimony that the state is not providing additional funding, but the state is mandating this. Can you please show me in the bill where this is a mandate?
I'm going to pull my, did I use the word mandated in my testimony?
Mandate, yes.
Yeah, can you tell me exactly where did I see that as mandated?
I have no idea where you saw that because this is not an mandate. This is enabling legislation that allows the university faculty and staff to choose if they want to collectively bargain. And even if they choose to want to collectively bargain, we do not mandate that every member of the faculty and staff participate. So this is not only not a mandate, this is the farthest thing from it. So do you want to correct your statement?
No, I do think this is mandated as being one part of three people who fund the education, and they should have equal, quite frankly, say in whether this legislation goes forward. I think your equal partner is a great partner in Montgomery County that may or may not be reflective of the rest of the state. But before the legislation goes, I do think that those folks should have a say in the approval of this legislation.
Great, thank you. I'm glad you brought up Montgomery County. Earlier during the sponsors panel, there was testimony that despite the fact that Montgomery College has been unionized for 10 years now, costs at other community colleges have increased more than costs at Montgomery College. Is that a fair statement, or did the person who made that statement not tell us the truth?
I don't have that chart in front of me, so I can't tell you what the cost escalation is, but I'll be happy to send it to you. I think one of the problems when they make a statement like that is that you also negate what the local support is that will drive down the cost from a tuition standpoint. We've had this conversation several years ago about the high contribution of local government for Montgomery County as compared to other similar sized community colleges. And I'll be happy to send that information to you again.
Okay, so are you saying that the fact that Montgomery College has been unionized for the past decade has had a detrimental impact on Montgomery College and its students?
Oh, no, I would never say that. What I'm telling you is there's a fiscal impact. And if you're saying we maintained the cost to students because unionization, I think that's a stretch. I think you've got to make that compared to what else the local contribution is to the college as opposed to other governments contributing to their community colleges, which will influence whether that tuition goes up or not.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Grice is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Bernie, obviously they're doing great things in Montgomery County, but do you see the success in Montgomery County translating, all across the state? Do you see that as a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone in the state?
Well, that's the great thing about Maryland's community colleges. They are not a state system. They are reflected of the mission and values of the communities they serve. And this legislation should also reflect the mission and values of the community colleges. There are programs that Montgomery offers that Allegheny doesn't. There are programs that Allegheny offers. So we have a mission and it's supported. And from this standpoint, it's fiscally supported by the ability of the local governments to do that. So Montgomery County is an outstanding college. As executive director for MAC, I want to say all of our community colleges are outstanding, but we do meet a local mission, and we are funded at different levels by the ability of our local governments to be able to do that.
Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the panel?
Mr. Chairman.
Sponsor of the bill is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to highlight something that I think that needs to be brought out in response to Mr. Sadusky's comments a little earlier. One of the things that collective bargaining does is to provide predictability as far as cost is concerned. And I think this is pretty much evident, and I'm not just speaking with words out of the air, but basically based upon facts. And when Montgomery College in 2016 had a funding issue, those particular units agreed to forego a 1% of their negotiated pay increases. That was a result of a union that collectively decided to do that. And that wasn't the only time. In the spring of 2020, just last year, all three unions agreed to forego any pay increases for fall 2021 due to the financial crisis caused by COVID-19. What I'm trying to highlight is that collective bargaining is just like the roads we drive on. It's a two-way street. And if you're going to make certain comments, I would like to make sure that they're based upon facts, and that actually is based upon facts. But I want to highlight something, or just bring out something to my good colleague from Montgomery County, who sits on the Appropriations Committee, mentioned about tuition increases as it relates to community colleges which have collective bargaining versus those which do not. And what I would say is that when you look at the facts, not supposition, but the facts, that between 2015 and 2019, the in-county tuition in Montgomery County, which is community college, which is unionized, grew by 12%. Non-unionized community colleges located at Harford County grew by 15%, which is higher than Montgomery College. Warwick Community College grew by 17%, which is higher than Montgomery College. And Cecil County grew by 22%, all of which none of these have collective bargaining for faculty and staff. So it is a two-way street. And what I'm simply saying is that based upon the facts that we have, you could arrive at the conclusion that community colleges which have collective bargaining actually are not driving the costs, but they actually are contributing to predictability and maintaining stability in the cost. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would just simply, say that this is a two-way street. The collective bargaining is a two-way street. And I would re-emphasize once again, that in the words of Mr. Sadusky, that one size doesn't fit all. And you're absolutely right. That's why this legislation is not a mandate. It is enabling. And if there are certain local jurisdictions that have community colleges where employees choose to engage into the collective and bargaining process, this provides the opportunity, the gate for them to do that. If there are local jurisdictions that do not want to do that, they don't have to. But it is there for those who want to do so. And I will say that we have 4 jurisdictions that currently have collective bargaining at our community colleges. And I think, Mr. Chairman, we have about 4 or 5 additional county executives, including the mayor of the city of Baltimore, who have submitted written letters of support for this process. We're probably bringing about 9 or 10 out of the 16 community colleges across the state of Maryland. With that, thank you very much, and I would request again a favorable.
Thank you very much for the bill sponsor. And to the bill sponsor and all the members of the Appropriations Committee, the email video that the bill sponsor was trying to share, that should be received in all our email boxes at this time. So we'll be able to preview that later. The gentleman from the Eastern Shore organized, Delegate Grice.
Thank you, Bernie. Based on the facts that were just articulated by the bill sponsor, if all the non-unionized colleges are giving raises at a higher rate than Montgomery County, which is unionized, why on earth would anyone want to join a union if these other counties that are non-unionized are actually doing a better job paying their staff and their employees?
Well, let me just be very clear, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just respond. I think you are mischaracterizing and misstating my comments. I did not in any way, form, or fashion say that the numbers that I quoted were wage increases. What I indicated was that the numbers I indicated, the percentages reflected tuition costs and overall costs at the community colleges. It had nothing to do with wages per se. Yeah, but again, let me just sort of, I hate to keep beating this same drum, but let me just put it another way. It's not a mandate. Let me say it another way. This bill is not a mandate. Let me try it another way in case I'm not coming across clearly. This particular bill is not a mandate. It is enabling. It's just like any other enabling piece of legislation we pass in this particular body. The locals request enable legislation if they decide to want to enact something on the local level. This bill is no different than that. So I've tried to make that very clear, and I think our supporters of the legislation have made that very clear. And what I will say, again, is that except for 3 categories that I mentioned a little bit earlier, one is that the bill has to be consistent with the Janus decision, the Supreme Court decision. That's a major change from the previous legislation that we passed. There is a phase-in on the ability to collectively bargain over wages, which is a phase-in that doesn't begin until 2023. That is, even if this bill should pass, that issue is not even ripe for the concerns that the committee is subcommittee members are articulating. And the third difference is that it provides for a more specific election process. Other than those 3 things, that is pretty much the same bill that we passed out of here a few years back, not only this committee, but the House. And,
Mr. Chairman, I didn't realize we were debating the bill during the bill, but I will retract that.
Excuse me one second, my colleague. I'm not finished.
If I may sponsor the bill.
But Mr. Chairman, what I will say, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. So what I will say that those are the three differences. I just wanted to make sure that they were highlighted because they were not brought out and just for the benefit of the committee. So you have that information as well to contemplate. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much to sponsor the bill. And what we're going to do at this time is that there's been a lot of discussion on the bill. The bill is going to be referred to the Personnel Subcommittee, and that's going to be an opportunity for more discussions on this. But we're going to go ahead and end the discussion on this bill at this time, and that will conclude the bill hearing for House Bill 894. And I just want to thank everyone for being here, and we're going to move on to the next bill.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members of the Appropriations Committee.
You're welcome. Next, we're going to hear House Bill 101. It's Delegate Charkoudian. It's the Human Services Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, Heat and Eat Program. And on behalf of Delegate Charkoudian, we have,
Victoria Tajsai.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize, sorry about that. We have
No worries, the last name is tough.
Who's going to be presenting the bill on behalf of the good delegate. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chang and members of the Appropriations Committee. Unfortunately, Delegate Laura Charkoudian is in ECM voting session right now, so I will present this bill on her behalf. My name is Victoria Tajsai. Last name is a bit difficult, so thank you so much, Vice Chair Chang, for deferring to me. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, is a primary source of nutrition assistance for many low-income families and individuals. SNAP enables low-income households to spend more on food than their limited budgets would otherwise allow and makes it easier to put enough food on the table. Households participating in SNAP include low-wage working families, low-income seniors, and people with disabilities living on fixed incomes. Almost 70% of participants in an average month are in families with children, and more than 1/4 are in households with seniors or people with disabilities. SNAP forms a critical foundation for their health and well-being, lifting millions out of poverty and improving food security. Heat and Eat is a federal program that more than a dozen states and the District of Columbia already utilize, which can boost benefits for SNAP recipients who are also eligible for and are receiving energy assistance. The program is designed to address energy assistance for homes as well as for apartments where utility costs are included in the rent. This federal program allows individuals who pay utilities through their rent but are eligible for utility assistance to claim the standard utility allowance on their SNAP application, thus increasing their SNAP benefits. By implementing this program, Maryland could provide millions of dollars of additional SNAP benefits to low-income individuals who are eligible for these federal dollars. This program is especially critical during the COVID-19 pandemic. By targeting those receiving both SNAP and energy assistance, it lifts those struggling with both food insecurity and energy costs. While food banks and food pantries continue to meet the rising need, SNAP has become a more powerful means of enabling eligible participants to put food on the table by expanding food budgets. With the implementation of the online SNAP program last year, which allows SNAP users to purchase groceries via online retailers, and the incoming restaurant meals program, which allows certain populations to use their benefits at restaurants, SNAP dollars are an important part of our local economy. In fiscal year 2020, more than $1 billion in SNAP benefits was spent in Maryland, providing support to grocery stores, farmers markets, and the entire agricultural supply chain. This bill requires the Maryland Department of Human Services to implement the Heat and Eat program in the state, providing a fix to ensure we are bringing in as much federal funds as possible to support food insecure Marylanders. For those reasons, Delegate Charkoudian respectfully requests a favorable report on House Bill 101. I also want to add that there is an amendment that you guys should also have. I believe the committee has the amendment on House Bill 101.
Okay, we'll be taking a look at it.
I just wanted to briefly touch base on it. What this amendment does was it will require the Department of Human Services to study and make recommendations on the feasibility of establishing automatic eligibility and approval for households to participate in the Maryland Energy Assistance Program if the household is receiving or eligible to receive Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program benefits under state and federal law. The study will also require the department to conduct a cost-benefit analysis. So right now, a SNAP beneficiary will qualify for me, but they have another application process that they have to go through. So this will look at removing that extra step and have you eligible for meat. Sorry for my dog in the background.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Togjai, for presenting the bill. On behalf of Delegate Charkoudian, we have several individuals who are going to be providing favorable testimony, and to each of those witnesses, please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. First, we have providing oral testimonies, Mr. Benjamin Orr, Maryland Center of Economic Policy. Mr. Orr?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Great. So again, for the record, my name is Benjamin Orr. I'm the president and CEO of the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit think tank that believes all Marylanders should be able to achieve their full potential in a healthy economy that offers a widely shared and rising standard of living. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program is a vital support for our economy, and expanding it by joining the Heat and Eat program would bring us closer to that vision of broadly shared prosperity. Others will talk about the impact of this bill on individual SNAP recipients, but I want to make 3 brief points about the broader economic benefits of this proposal. First, if you pass this bill, the additional federal Heat and Eat dollars will generate new economic activity in Maryland, because recipients will immediately spend it at farmers markets, grocers, restaurants, and other local retailers. Therefore, I have a minor quibble with the fiscal note. I would argue that the impact on small business is actually positive rather than neutral. And in fact, research indicates that every new SNAP dollar increases economic activity overall by as much as $1.50. Secondly, low-income Marylanders will continue to experience the negative effects of the current economic crisis long after the public health emergency is over, and implementing Heat and Eat is one way to help them weather the storm's long tail. And finally, I would note that because of the disproportionate economic impact of both COVID-19 and past policy decisions on Black, brown, and female Marylanders, any policy like this that targets aid to low-income households will help reduce inequality. Therefore, the Maryland Center on Economic Policy urges a favorable report on House Bill 101. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Orr, for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Louise Hayes with the Community Legal Services of Philadelphia, who's providing both oral and written testimony.
We have not seen Louise Hayes come into the waiting room.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Vanessa Pierre with the Homestead Hustle and Healing, providing both written and oral testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity to come before you today in support of House Bill 101. My name is Vanessa Pierre, and I'm a single mother to 3 beautiful children, resident and food activist in Montgomery County. I serve on multiple boards and councils who also fight food insecurity. However, I come to you today on behalf of everyday people in my community who work hard to keep their families afloat. 2019 was one of the hardest years of my life. Money was tight and there just wasn't enough of anything to go around. I was working full time during the day and took a job at night. My kids never saw me and I was mentally and physically drained. I received SNAP benefits during this time, but because of my income, it couldn't last past a week. I was constantly faced with tough decisions I could never envision having to make, chief among them, lights or lunch. I enrolled in the Energy Assistance Program to help me pay for my utility bills. These 2 programs together saved my family. It's not because the lights were on and our fridge was full. It was because I was free from the guilt of not being able to provide for my family, and it allowed me the mental space to begin to make a plan to get our family back on our feet. This bill will allow families a chance to get back on their feet. In 2020, I have been with community partners before dawn preparing to distribute food to a line of people that never seems to end. I have watched my colleagues turn away families when the food ran out. Rain or shine, they've stepped up, and I urge you to do the same. Be the family's yes in a sea of no's and not yets. 15 other states and DC have passed this program and said yes to its residents. They've decided to be the bridge between an already established federal program and its residents, and we should be no different. Passing House Bill 101 will say to families like mine, yes, we see you. Yes, we stand with you. Yes, we are here to help. If ever there was a time to say yes to our families, our veterans, our seniors, and our disabled, it is now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Pierre, for sharing your story. Next, we have providing both written and oral testimony, Ms. Catherine Nardi with the Montgomery County Food Council.
Yes, hi, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Nardi. I am the programs manager at the Montgomery County Food Council. The Food Council has been leading food security initiatives in our community since 2012 by convening more than 100 local food assistance partners on a regular basis to better understand and address food access challenges that Montgomery County residents are facing, guiding the implementation of the Montgomery County Food Security Plan, conducting SNAP outreach efforts, and actively participating in local, state, and federal advocacy, policy, and process change to increase food security and foster a more equitable local food system. Prior to COVID-19, the Food Council implemented and led a senior SNAP outreach program that successfully shared SNAP enrollment information with more than 660 eligible Montgomery County seniors and led to the submission of 109 new SNAP applications on behalf of senior residents. Among Montgomery County seniors, 5.8% have incomes below the federal poverty line, and the Heat and Eat program would increase SNAP benefits for thousands of senior residents throughout Maryland to give them more food purchasing power so that they can live in dignity and achieve better long-term health outcomes. In recent months, as unemployment and uncertainty has grown in the state of Maryland, we've seen record-setting SNAP enrollment rates. As of December 2020, more than 68,000 Montgomery County residents were enrolled in SNAP, accounting for 11% of all SNAP recipients in the state. While food councils, food banks, and food pantries have mobilized to address food access challenges, SNAP continues to be an absolutely essential tool for residents to purchase culturally appropriate, healthy food in dignified and efficient ways. This legislation, which is a proven strategy implemented in more than 15 states and in DC, could increase SNAP benefits for an estimated 32,000 Maryland residents and is critical to addressing hunger in our communities. House Bill 101 will also address the inequities that low-income residents of Montgomery County who are Black, Hispanic, and who have disabilities face, with these demographic groups being at a particularly elevated risk of both high energy burdens and food insecurity as compared to the average Montgomery County household.
Thank you, Ms. Nardi. If you could summarize.
Sure. Maryland residents should never have to choose between keeping their lights on or keeping their families fed, and this bill will help to make sure that that decision doesn't have to be made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nardi. Next, we will hear from J.D. Robinson, who's providing both written and oral testimony from the Maryland Hunger Solution.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman McIntosh, Vice Chairman Chang, and members of the House Appropriations Committee. Thank you all for lending us the opportunity to speak today. My name is J.D. Robinson, and I am the Anti-Hunger Program Associate for SNAP at Maryland Hunger Solutions. Maryland Hunger Solutions is a statewide, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to end hunger and improve the nutrition, health, and well-being of all Marylanders through outreach and advocacy. For over 10 years, we have assisted anyone in Maryland seeking food assistance through applying for SNAP and connecting them to local resources. Through this work, we know that families and individuals like Vanessa that are struggling with poverty are not solely having trouble putting food on the table or keeping their home warm, but that many of these issues are often intertwined. The Heat and Eat program seeks to alleviate some of that burden. You've heard from our partners today on the impact that it could have in Maryland. 33 organizations from across the state have signed on in support of this legislation, including AARP Maryland, the Prince George's County Food Equity Council, both the Maryland and Capital Area food banks, and multiple community-based and faith-based groups. This program is currently being utilized by multiple states, including our neighbors to the north and south, Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia. Our colleague Louise Hayes of Community Legal Services of Philadelphia has submitted testimony in support of this legislation. In it, she says, quote, "From Pennsylvania's perspective, the decision to adopt Heat and Eat was an easy one. It greatly benefits our neediest seniors and people with disabilities, and it greatly simplifies program administration at minimal cost." She also provided us with the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services operations memo from February of 2011 from then Acting Director of Operations, Lourdes Padilla. This memo details how local directors are to implement the Heat and Eat program in Pennsylvania. Secretary Padilla, Maryland's current Secretary of Human Services, has implemented this program to remarkable success in Pennsylvania. And we believe that with her knowledge and leadership, there could not be a better time to carry out this program in Maryland. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, our federal and state government acted swiftly to ensure that eligible SNAP recipients receive the maximum benefit allotment available for their household size. But the effects of the pandemic will be felt for years to come, and that emergency allotment will eventually end. The Heat and Eat program is a policy change that will be beneficial to low-income Marylanders for years well beyond the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson.
Maryland Hunger Solutions urges a favorable report on House Bill 101.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. The committee will now hear questions from members of the Appropriations Committee. Delegate Kittleman's recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. I have to say, when I read this bill or looked at it, in order to understand it, I felt like I was in a scavenger hunt. It was not easy to figure out what it actually was requiring. So I gave up, and that's okay. But in looking to see how much it would cost, I was concerned over written testimony from two of our witnesses. AARP, I guess it's ARP now, says that services that estimated under the heat and eat provisions, actually they're quoting a study that was done by the Maryland Department of Human Resources, and that was a couple of years ago. So it's that there'd be 32,000 Marylanders that would receive an additional $59 a month of SNAP benefits. This is a $1,888,000 a month and $22,656,000 a year, which I think needs to be thought about in terms of the budget. Public Justice Center says it is estimated that households who experience food insecurity in Maryland need a total of $361,501 more per year to address their food needs. And I don't want to argue with any of those, but what I really want to ask is, we always look at bills unilaterally. And I just wondered if this bill had in particular been looked at in the context of the public benefits for families and children, public benefits for children and families, pardon me, that DLS publishes. There's a new one for 2020 that categorizes all of the bills that are there, all of the programs that are there that can.
Delegate Kittleman, if you could ask your question, please.
I'm getting there, I'm sorry, but this is something that's really important to me and I want to find out. And fourth, I just want to also say, Chairman Kaiser, thank you so much for the bill you put in, because I think a lot of the problems is people being understand how to access the programs. But if you look at this book, it says that, and this is, I just took one of the pages, this happens to be Howard County, and it tells you they take a family of three, a mother, a child with 7-3, and it below poverty level compared with 100% of poverty, 200% of poverty, then estimated median state income. And according to this document, someone who is below poverty level, who is accessing the programs we have on the books, would end up with $65,690 worth of what, that would be their essential income. And if you take the housing out of it, which I know we don't have a lot of, still $46,281. You do better if you have 100% of poverty, where you could get $74,831 worth of income if you have the housing. And what I'm saying is,
what is your question?
How many more programs are we going to continue to add until we really, where are we trying to get to? What is the end of poverty? What is enough? I don't want to cut it off before it is, but it bothers me that we add programs that everyone says we absolutely have to have because everyone is suffering, when we already have programs in the book that should make it so that it isn't. So that's my question.
So if I could respond briefly as I can, because here at the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, we look at the budget and these programs as a whole, whereas most of the folks on this panel are specifically focused on hunger. And I think the first thing to understand is this doesn't cost the state anything. It's all federal dollars. That's number one. So I want to clarify that from the beginning of your comments. The second thing is, I don't have the particular report you're referring to in front of me at the moment, but having looked at them in the past, while those numbers we might think are relatively high, or they get closer to our median income in the state, which we do have a relatively high median income in the state, it is extraordinarily unlikely that any individual household is actually receiving all of those benefits. There are some very optimistic estimates made when they're coming out in terms of actually receiving all of those programs is actually really rare among recipients in Maryland. So I would just urge you to add that information as context to the report that you're reading.
I don't disagree. I'm sure you're right. But my question is, why is that so? Why do we have these programs in the books that we are not apparently doing well enough so that people are accessing them? It just makes no sense to me.
Well, I think it's
to continue new programs and we're not doing what we're supposed to do with the ones that we have.
This may be a question that's getting beyond the scope of this bill, because I actually think that the food benefit functions differently, and maybe JD can speak to this, from other benefits, and that it actually is, and correct me if I'm wrong, JD, but it's an entitlement where we are meeting people's needs. If we can get people signed up, they receive the benefit. Unlike the housing benefits, where the federal government and it doesn't put enough money into it. So
that one is problematic.
This bill, I think that's a fine question, but it's maybe not relevant to this particular bill.
Thank you, Mr. Orr. Thank you, Delegate Kittelman. We have a question from the Chair of the Appropriations Committee, Chair McIntosh.
Yeah, and I think Mr. actually got to the meat of the answer, which is it's rare that people access all these programs. And the programs are developed because different groups of people have separate and very distinct needs. But let me ask a question relevant to this bill. I want for just a moment to imagine that I need food stamps and I qualify. How many food stamps, what amount of food stamps do I get towards per day towards my groceries that I need to eat off of? Okay.
So SNAP benefits are calculated based on three things, and that's household size, household income, and household expenses. That income can be prorated to the number of adults that are working. The expenses take into account shelter costs like rent, lease, property tax, mortgage payments, other utility bills, water, electricity. And the way it's calculated now, as far as utility costs are concerned, is you're given either a limited utility allowance or a standard utility allowance. And what Heat Meat does is that it triggers the standard, which is
I just want to know how much right now in the program I would get if I qualified for food stamps. What's the average that an individual person, me, would get?
So I'll say this, the minimum right now in the state is $15. The maximum is $194. Currently, with the emergency allotment, every single household is getting the maximum for their household size. For a household size of one, it's $194 a month. But now there's a 15% boost thanks to the Biden administration, so it's a little bit higher. I don't have the math right in front of me. So this bill, when it would come into effect, would be there to shore up what happens when that emergency allotment ends. The average for a single person household in Maryland before was somewhere to the tune of $86 to $89 a month.
Right. That is what I recall. So if I qualified for food stamps and I'm a single person, senior citizen, right? I would get, in the original program, $80 some a month to buy food, and now I get slightly over 100, which is exactly my point. Divide that by 30 days real quickly, do the math, appropriators, and see that we are not feeding people adequately, even under the current program, although it is very, very necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a question from the gentleman from Western Maryland, Delegate Beitzel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a question probably go to JD. It was stated that there's no limit to the amount of federal money that will come in, and this doesn't need to be matched with any state money or anything. So irrespective of how many people would apply or be eligible for this, how the feds will match that, and so who manages that, who asks for the money to be refunded, and who determines who makes the request to the feds for the money?
So this wouldn't be a reimbursement program. It would be funds available through our existing low-income home energy assistance program, or MEEP, Maryland Energy Assistance Program here in Maryland. So that would go through, I believe, Office of Home Energy Programs and DHS in a joint request for budget.
So and if they make the request, it's automatically funded by the federal government?
The light heat benefits do come in at a certain amount. I believe they're requested every budget year, and that can go up or down. I don't have full knowledge on how the budget request process works.
And if this bill is passed and it increases that amount, what my point is are we sure we're going to get the money from the federal government to fund this program if we pass this bill?
Yes. So
Okay.
other states have done options where they have supplemented funds using state money. Maryland is in a position where we don't need to have to do that.
All right. Thank you.
Delegate Valentina Smith is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I, of course, am known for wanting to feed everyone as much as we can all the time. Electricity. In our subcommittee, we try. The chairman's laughing, he knows. I just want to give JD the chance to respond to the department's letter of information since they're not coming today and not testifying. So they're somehow challenging that it would interfere potentially with some of the meat benefits that go out. I'm not sensing that that's a concern that any of the advocates have.
From what we've seen in other states, the inclusion of this program does not interfere with other meat funding. It could mean a reallocation and a request for more funding from the federal government to provide additional light heat benefits, but it doesn't interfere with anyone else's.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And Mr. Chair, can I ask one more clarifying question?
Sure.
I just want to clarify, we're paying attention all the time, make sure I heard correctly. You said the Secretary Padilla already applied for when she was working in Pennsylvania for this program and already thought it was good enough for the people of Pennsylvania to run?
Secretary Padilla was part of the team at their Department of Human Services in 2011 when the program was implemented and did it to astounding effect. And
okay, I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the panelists on House Bill 101? Seeing none, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 101. Next, we'll move to the last bill of today. It is House Bill 46, Delegate Griffith, Education Student Horizon Basic Scorecard, Students' Right to Know Act of 2021. Delegate Griffith, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Chairwoman McIntosh, Vice Chairman Chang, and members of the committee. And thank you for allowing me to come before the committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Mike Griffith, and I'm urging a favorable report on HB 46, the Student Right to Know Act of 2021. This bill is in support of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, the Foundation for Government Accountability, and parents that I work with, from neurotypical students to at-risk students and everyone in between. There's a great deal of conversation and legitimate concern about the student debt crisis in our nation. Each year, millions of young adults are graduating from college with thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt. The average Maryland student with student loans has about $42,000 in loan debt, which is the second highest in the nation. Many are struggling to build their futures while they pay off student loan debt instead of trying to address the problem on the back end. It may be wiser or in concert to minimize the problem from the starting point. There's bipartisan agreement that student loans are a massive crisis. Senator Elizabeth Warren was the one who said we need to stop treating students as profit centers. And young people are struggling with financial literacy, compounding the problem. When I was a young person, I was very financially illiterate, so I relate to the struggle. Between 2009 and 2018, there was an 8% slip in the amount people could correctly answer the most basic questions about financial principles. The result comes as there's been increased focus on improving young Americans' low levels of financial understanding, especially with a country saddled with $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. The U.S. Treasury Department even recently recommended colleges require financial literacy courses and financial reward letters that clearly delineate college costs. It is very difficult as a young person to accurately consider the cost of college when you're not financially literate and when there's a lack of accessible information. We can reduce student debt by giving parents and students the resources to make informed financial decisions regarding higher education. Students and their parents must be aware of the options in front of them, from vocational training to apprenticeships routes to a well-paying job, and students must also have the facts about real costs of a degree will be average graduation rates and list the most demand jobs in there. I want to hurry up here. I know I'm running out of time. So this bill establishes an online database to share the most common in-demand jobs in the state, the average starting salary and education needed for those jobs, the average tuition for public universities in the state, contrasted with vocational and technical schools, the average monthly student loan payment for obtaining a four-year degree at those public universities, contrast with the vocational and technical schools, and the average starting salary for those who graduated from vocational and technical schools. Finally, after discussing this bill with a number of stakeholders, we've offered a friendly amendment that will ensure the data collection does not place a financial burden on colleges and universities. I'm grateful for your time, and I urge a favorable report on HB 46.
Thank you very much, Delegate Griffith. This afternoon, we have favorable testimony from two people who are providing both oral and written testimony. First, we have Therese Hessler, the Foundation of Government Accountability. Ms. Hessler?
Good afternoon.
Just a reminder, 2-minute time limit.
I will ensure to do that. Thank you. And I truly appreciate the time.
Great, thank you.
My name is Teresa Hessler, and I'm here representing the Foundation for Government Accountability in support of House Bill 46. This bill helps Maryland address a growing problem in the United States. The average Marylander's student debt specifically totals more than $42,000, the second highest in the nation. Accrual of student debt is at times an unavoidable cost of obtaining a degree, but can also be the result of a simple lack of awareness of personal finances and economics. House Bill 46 would help young Maryland students by increasing access to important information on the cost of college, other training opportunities, and potential earnings data. This information will be delivered directly to its intended audience. It is smart, it is practical, and it is necessary. How many of us really knew what college would cost when we were leaving high school? How many of us knew what our monthly student loan bills would be, or even had an approximation? Between 2014 to 2016, nearly 4 million undergraduates with student loan obligations dropped out, not benefiting from any income increase from college, but suffering much of the debt. Unfortunately, those who do not graduate have a default rate 3 times higher than those that do. There are a multitude of opportunities available to young people, and there are ways to optimize the education experience and to keep costs as low as possible. They just need to know about them. There are also opportunities outside the 4-year bachelor's degree process. With the cost of college growing at a rate almost 8 times faster than wages, now is as appropriate a time as any to explore those options. I politely ask for a favorable report on House Bill 46. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hessler. Next, we'll hear testimony and also written testimony from Angeles Juarez.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you for letting me speak today in favor of House Bill 46, the Students' Right to Know Act of 2021. I'm Angeles Juarez. I'm a 17-year-old student at Annapolis High School in Annapolis. I'm currently a junior in the International Baccalaureate program, which is a heavily college oriented for many scholars here in Annapolis, Maryland, and around the world. This bill would bring tremendous change forward in regards to how students who'd like to attend a higher education institution are able to shape their future with information they can gain from their schools and the state government. Personally, I'm a first-generation student who's discovering what it is like to be independent and self-sufficient. This brings its many challenges, which teach me about life, but it also brings many joys and discoveries. Education has a strong foothold in my life, and I believe that this bill will bring positive change towards my ability to figure out and where I want to go to college and how I will be able to pay for this. I'm excited about the future, but this curiosity also brings awareness that attending college is not a cheap thing to do, especially in the 21st century. I've seen many recounts of adults these days of how their debt has followed them around. There is a lot of appreciation for any tools and resources we students will have to figure out for the best route to follow, especially during these unprecedented times, and to families who will motivate students. This will be a great game changer for those who would like to attend college. I politely ask for a favorable report for House Bill 46, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Juarez. Thank you for being here. We also have written letters of information from the Maryland Education Commission, the University System of Maryland, and also the Maryland State Department of Education. At this time, we'll take questions from members of the Appropriations Committee, and Delegate Mangiano is recognized.
Thank you, Delegate Griffith, for bringing this. I like a lot of the ideas here. I'm just looking at the fiscal note. It looks like it's about 283,000 or so in the first year, and then about 100,000 each year after that. Can you just touch on that, like where that money's going, and just give me a little more detail?
No, I definitely appreciate the question, Delegate. And obviously in this time, fiscal notes matter a great deal. So the slight increase is going to be the I believe, totally eradicated by the amount of money that we're going to save Maryland taxpayers when the student loan debt helps get reduced through this bill. Again, Maryland has the second highest student loan debt in the country. It's also worth noting that similar legislation in Kansas and West Virginia did not produce a fiscal note in the long run. So this bill does not require a new position necessarily to move forward. It should be workable within the existing resources, which I believe would lower or eliminate the fiscal note altogether.
Okay, yeah, so I was just wondering because it seemed like a lot of this stuff, which again, I agree with, could probably be done for a lot less money than that. But I appreciate your answer, kind of helped me out there. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 46. And Delegate Griffith, we also have the amendments here in the committee, so we'll be taking a look at those too. At this time, just
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. That ends the bill hearing for today. As a reminder to the committee, tomorrow we have a time change in the subcommittee meeting times. It will start at 12:30. So 12:30 for all the budget hearings on the subcommittees. Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. You've done, as always, an excellent job running the committee. I want to apologize for being in and out. I am in and out because of something I indicated earlier today. We are working with the governor and the Senate on a COVID Relief Act bill. And as we are speaking, ECM is voting and Ways and Means voted unanimously on that bill. It does have appropriated items in the bill, which I have had to be engaged in, and you will all receive a briefing all of us will, in our respective caucuses tomorrow morning. But this is, again, very hard work on behalf of many of our colleagues, including members of this committee. So thank you very much. Thanks for a great day of bill hearings. And again, my apologies, although I don't know why I'm apologizing. I think the Vice Chair does an outstanding job. So thank you, everybody.